departments, schools, and casualday.co.za. Follow us on social media at Casual Day SA or WhatsApp 076 611 4780. This is an SABC supported initiative.
They will all walk onto the pitch with victory on their minds, but the final whistle will reveal who wants it the most, who will display football brilliance. This is the Hollywood Bet Super League. Catch Mzansi Queens of the beautiful game. TUT Matatanta Ladies FC versus the University of Fort Hare Ladies FC on Saturday, 7 September at 11 a.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available at your fingertips on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the game.
Outsurance Essential is designed for older cars. A 48-year-old man pays only 325 Rand a month for his 2007 white Toyota Yaris T1 and gets up to 1 million Rand liability cover. That means if you cause an accident, the other car will be covered up to 1 million Rand. Get Outsurance Essential for unfinanced cars older than 5 years and valued at less than 125,000 Rand. It's time to switch and save. SMS car to 43187. That's car to 43187 today. Outsurance is a licensed insurer and FSP, T's and C's, and information online.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
We are the keepers of dreams. We mold them into light beams and weave them into life's seams. You and I. We are the keepers of dreams. We mold them into light beams and weave them into life's seams. You and I. No, life is not what it seems. We strip the fat from the lean and find the facts in between. The visions we redeem and the agony of choice. Yours is just a mind and mine is just a voice, but when we love with the heat that would rise like a song in flight on the flesh of our backs. If it's love that we lack, then we walk with the pain that we seek, the love exchange that we spite. As we move through indecisions, rising in hope, fading in fright, we ride the crest of intuition on the journey of this life. And by the hands of the infinite, we hear the cries of the rest, weighed down by their intelligence, submitting to this test. But you and I push the boundaries of reason. You and I plot the mysteries of seasons. You and I paint this history to free men. Nothing can be stopped like you and I. We are the keepers of dreams. We mold them into light beams and weave them into life's seams. You and I.
One of my favorite poets and authors there, Lebo Mashile, and that poem, You and I. You're listening to The Talking Point. It's 9 after 9 o'clock. Welcome to the show. I'm Cathy Mohlahlana, and it's always good to be in your company. And of course, we'll be together until midday, leading the conversation right here on SAFM. We will kickstart the show with the National Roundtable, and of course, it's your opportunity, of course, to get in touch and raise matters of national interest. Put them on the National Round Table. I'll take your calls on 086 000 2032. That's the number to dial to reach our studio line, 086 000 2032. On the WhatsApp voice note line, 0614 104 107. Our open line yesterday had me thinking for really a good part of the day, because some of the issues that you had raised around corruption and, just the bribing that is taking place, the corruption that is taking place around services. I must say, when you look at how many sectors across our society are affected by corruption, it is just unbelievable. And some of the messages that came in included institutions of higher learning, corruption around people paying for not only their children to get spots in institutions of higher learning, but also to pay money to guarantee passes for some qualifications. It is unbelievable. And I just don't know how we are going to deal with this as a society. We have to find some way of, even if it's bringing a level of shame back, that it must be shameful for an individual to be corrupt. It must be shameful for people to do wrong. That might help. Of course, it's not the only way to deal with criminality, because crime is crime, and therefore you need the criminal justice system to also kick in and do what it needs to do, which is pursue justice. But I won't lie, I was incredibly disheartened by part of what you had to share, because it's just so revealing of what is happening in our society. And I think that we have to find ways of saying, well, now that this is the situation that we are in, how do we fix it? How do we change it? How do we ensure that some of these negative cycles are not continuously perpetuated? We have to find a way of changing things. But I don't know how we do it. And perhaps you've got some ideas of what it is that all of us can start actively doing to turn things around. But it is incredibly disheartening and a very sad state of affairs, I think, for our country across the board, when we look at the decay and the rot and just how bad behavior is rewarded. We reward bad behavior. We say that it's okay. You behave badly. Well, actually, here's more money. Here's a raise. Here's a seat in parliament. There just no consequences. One gets the sense in our society. Anyway, those are just my reflections on our open line yesterday. And like I said, there's still a lot that you shared with us that is still playing through my mind. But we'll take your calls on 086 000 2032 is the number to dial for the open line. This morning, in fact, we're going to focus just on one of the issues that has really caused a lot of distress and frustration, and that's looking at extortion and looking at the rise of extortion. We'll be doing that for our Citizens Corner. Today we'll be joined by a number of experts. We'll be joined by community activists. We'll be joined by the Black Business Council. All of them are going to weigh in on this problem that is confronting our society. And it becomes yet another example of what happens when you let things go. When the extortion and the protection rackets were starting out, it was not given the attention that it needed. And now you have it spreading like wildfire, and you've got ministers running left, right, and center. But the point is that it should have never been allowed to get here. It should have never been allowed to get here. And the consequences of it for ordinary citizens, it's absolutely dire. People are unable to live their lives because others feel entitled to their money, to their assets. That's what this is about. So we'll have that conversation then in the 10 o'clock hour, and we'll hear some of the insights, at least in as far as the experiences, but also what is it now that needs to be done, right? What needs to be done now? And the final hour of the show, we're going to be looking at the political party funding report. This is for the period 1st of April 2024 to 30 June 2024. It's the first quarter of the 24-25 financial year. And you remember that that is also the quarter in which we were reaching the climax of the election cycle. And so the declarations are out, the figures are out, and the IEC in its report saying that political parties received just under 190 million rand in donations. So we'll look at that political party funding with My Vote Counts and also an independent elections expert. And one just looks at the numbers, right? You just look at the numbers and you know that there's something that's off. 190 million rand? Is that all political parties received for their elections when they had big election machinery? Are we to really believe that 190 million rand is what they received amongst them? Come on, it cannot be true. So there are clearly still big gaps when it comes to the reporting and the declaring of these funds. But we'll explore those issues in the final hour of the show. All right, this is your open line. I'm taking your call. 086 000 2032 is the number to dial on the WhatsApp voice note line. 0614 104 107. I'm back with your calls.
It's Truck Month at Ford, which means you save big when you upgrade to the ultimate adventure-ready 4x4. Get the Ford Ranger Tremor for only 876,600, which comes standard with off-road features like adaptable Bilstein shocks and easy clean flooring. That's only 876,600 at your nearest Ford dealer today. T&Cs apply. Comoros and the Gambia have a huge clash for 90 minutes in the AFCON qualifier. Both nations are optimistic for the significant 3 points. Yet, the question remains, who wants it the most? This is the Total Energies 2025 Africa Cup of Nations qualifier. Witness the beauty of African football. Comoros up against the Gambia on Wednesday, 4 September at 5 p.m. Live at your fingertips on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
Well, this morning, I'm starting off in Pietermaritzburg. David, good morning.
Morning, Cathy. Thank you.
Yes.
Yesterday, there was someone, I think he or she sent an SMS or WhatsApp about the corruption that was reported previously taking place at Nelson Mandela Medical School here in Durban. Yes, there were lots of reports about the corruption that was taking place. Apparently, some of the parents with deep pockets were buying expensive cars for lecturers for their kids to graduate, also the enrollment as well. But I don't know what happened to that investigation. I guess simply because it involved people with deep pockets, it was squashed, similar to what happened in...
Do you remember how long ago this was, David?
A few years back, there was an investigation that was being conducted. But after that, I didn't know what transpired, but I guess it was squashed. It's similar to what happened in the Tongati Mall.
The mall collapse, yes, I remember that. I covered that mall collapse, yeah.
Yes, nothing happened. So if you have deep pocket, you're able to make such things vanish. Yeah, thank you.
David, do you think that's where the problem lies? That people who have access to money are able to make their problems go away? But at the heart of it is a criminal justice system, right, that is supposed to be operating, that is supposed to be doing its job. So it shouldn't matter whether or not you have money, whether or not you are able to hire the best lawyers. If you have done something wrong, the system should be operating well enough on its own that all of us are held accountable by the same and to the same standard.
Yeah, they're saying here in Durban that for you to succeed in whatever you do, mostly for politicians, you must have an Indian by your side bankrolling you. So the matter of Nelson Mandela institution, I was not surprised when it vanished because it involved people with deep.
But what does this? What does that statement mean, David? Unpack it for me. You understand the nuance of being in Pietermaritzburg, of being in KZN. What does that statement mean?
It means, Cathy, you'll be bankrolled. They're bankrolling politicians. So when they need a favor, like what happened in Tungate Mall, that is why the investigation didn't see the light of the day. It vanished because it involves, because the owner obviously had some politicians in his pocket. So that is why the investigation didn't proceed. You know, it's the same thing with the Nelson Mandela institution of higher learning.
All right, David, thanks for calling in. Yeah, it is incredibly worrying, you know, that we live in a society where it feels that you can buy your way out of trouble, that if you have enough money, you can do what you want and get away with it and nothing will happen to you. That seems to be the seed of all of the ills that we then face as a society. Because wrong is done, it goes unpunished, and then it incentivizes those who are doing wrong to continue doing wrong. And I don't think it's the majority of South Africans that are that way. I think it's the minority, but because they get away with it, then they just keep with the bad behavior. Percy, you're in Matlosana, good morning.
This is Cathy, how are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Good. Can I say, you mustn't ask you, how are you? This Cathy, man, you see this corruption that is happening here in Northwest. It's like we allow this corruption to happen, and they are failing us big time. From an example, you believe in legislature, there is 10 people, those who doesn't have a metric, but it's something normal. Here in Northwest, in legislature, 10 people doesn't have a metric, but they appointed, they've been sworn in legislature.
Okay, what kind of positions do they have, Percy?
The other one, it was a deputy speaker of legislature. He suspended. I don't know why he suspended him. Why did he expel him? Doesn't have a metric.
A deputy speaker that doesn't have a metric, Percy?
He doesn't have a metric. He's the chairperson of Sanko, Koza. That is why I don't know what's going on. The deputy speaker of legislature doesn't have a metric, says Cathy. And he was appointed soon. Even he was in China, the West part, for something like a week. And when you check, like when you raise those issues, because we've been excited after Sanko was appointed, I saw that we must have someone from Sanko to raise those issues that challenge us in Northwest. But Sanko for my side is the big scam. Even I'm asking myself, why they keep quiet about it? Because there are more than 10 those people who don't have a metric in legislature. When you check, there is a guy from NEC from Sanko who ran a forum called Heartful Business Forum. He keep quiet because of he acting like a spokesperson. Can you invite someone from Sanko to come and explain what's going on about Sanko in Northwest? Because of things are bad. And are the official, how can you have someone who don't have metric in legislature? After that, you saw him he's something normal, he's go to China to create something like budget. I don't know what he was doing in China.
Yeah, you know, Percy, I don't know if the issue of skills but also just qualifications and having public representatives that are adequately qualified for the positions that they're occupying. I don't know if there's if that's
But
something that's going to change.
But I think there is some requirement from a deputy legislative. Since Canada are dealing with the budget, Northwest, the whole Northwest budget, they can put municipality under administration. But if you put someone who don't have matric, what about those students who are studying in Northwest University, the graduates who cannot find work, but you put someone because of the chairperson of Sanko must go to represent us in legislature? That is why we don't have service delivery, because of even if something falls, everything, they are going to protect him. Like they protect him, they put him in that office.
Is this not what this debate around cadre deployment is about, Percy?
It is a cadre deployment because of Tepo Koza is the chairperson of Sanko.
But look at what the DA has done. Have they done any different to the ANC? John Steenhuisen?
At least that John Steenhuisen has been fair. He doesn't have a matric. He doesn't have
His
a
chief
he's
of
got only
staff?
matric.
His chief of staff?
Hey, Cathy. Hey, I don't know what to say now. Because of now what I'm doing, I try to protect the dignity of GNU. Because of academia, say things are better in us because of we don't have the services, and they are more than 10. Because of I see ANC, it keep quiet about others. It is only Tepo Koza they suspend him. How can you suspend him because he doesn't have matric? They're supposed to expel him.
All right, Percy, out in Mohlahlana, thanks for that call. Yeah, but we have to have honest conversations about this, right? What is being done differently? In what ways has the bar changed since the government of national unity? What is the confidence that we have that we're going to get different outcomes than what we have had all along? Tsukolo, you and Harry Smith, good morning.
Askeji, how are you?
Good, thank you, Tsukolo. Don't ask me how I am.
Askeji, where were you last weekend?
I took the week off, Tsukolo.
Okay.
Yeah. I didn't have a nanny. My nanny went home because she needs to rest as well.
Okay, no, that's good. Askeji, yesterday I wanted to come in, but I failed. There was a caller who was talking about the corruption that is happening and the corruption that was happening by then, like apartheid time. So unfortunately, it was bad for my side that Mr. Levy didn't pick me up yesterday. But nevertheless, let me leave that one. Siskit, can I ask you? I know you are not allowed to answer some of the question on what this GNU government of unity. What is it working for now, according to you, or is not?
I don't know. You must tell me. What is your experience? What is your sense of what is happening now that you're beginning to see the ministers in action? Do you have hope? Are you confident that things are going to be different? Do you feel that there has been a shift?
Yeah, no. According to now, to me, is it working? Because look now, it's after a long time. We had relief on fuel price for 3 times in a row.
Let us
be honest. Guys. Let us be honest. Right.
Tsukolo.
Okay.
What does that have? What does that have to do with the GNU?
No.
Look, of course, the rand strengthening is good for the country, but are we really going to credit petrol price drops that we know are influenced by so many market factors, most of them international? Are we going to credit that to GNU?
Yes, it's Kate, because look now, we have a price like expensive things with price because of fuel.
So when the interest rate goes down, you're going to say it's because of GNU?
No, it's yes, it's Cathy. You see now, things that are happening, what's happening before is not happening.
Well, it's unscientific. Your
It's
reasoning is unscientific.
serious, it's Cathy. Even the ministers that we have. Last time I did ask your colleagues there that hey, this thing of calling people who are not useful, we must talk about it. Because now we are calling people who are going to tell us they leave this country and join that. And I mean, they leave this party and join that party. That thing is not right. We need people who are in power who can come and tell us that what he or she's plan is like now they are in office. Like for Mackenzie, like you understand. I did mention Mackenzie last weekend that we need to talk with those people, because they whatever they're doing now, you can't see that. We don't see what this guy doing, Mackenzie now. And then only have 2-3 months in the office, but at least there is different there.
Tsokolo, I'm going to leave it there. Tsokolo is out in Harrismith. I would say, Tsokolo, you need to set the bar a little bit higher, right? Let's just elevate. Let's elevate. It's time for your latest news headlines.
Good morning. In the headlines, the Tourism Business Council of South Africa says it's encouraging to see rising revenue in the sector. This as the country recovers from a tourism slump due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The Communications and Digital Technologies Minister Solly Malatsi has revealed that money that was stolen at Postbank included social grants. He has confirmed referring the forensic report on governance and financial breaches at Postbank to the Hawks. And the ANC Youth League says it's seen a trend in which among some government officials implicated in corrupt activities are attempting to avoid processes of accountability by simply joining the opposition. I'll have details on these and other stories at 10.
So Sharon in the office was telling me the way drip is so expensive these days. She's now waiting for her old clothes to come back into fashion. I say, Joza, while you're waiting, why not let your money do the things in a Netbank Just Invest account, where you can get your money after 24 hours notice? Oganchani voiceman.
In Jano Mabel, you can earn up to 8.75% interest. Anyone can open an investment account via the Money app in under 2 minutes. See money differently. Nedbank. We're a licensed FSP and registered credit provider. Promo rates apply. The Mediterranean Knights are after the big prize, a win in the opener of the AFCON qualifier. But Amavubi differs and insists on traveling back home with a massive bag of 3 points. This is the Total Energies 2025 Africa Cup of Nations qualifier. Witness the beauty of African football. Libya versus Rwanda on Wednesday, 4 September at 6 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4 and SABCSport.com. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
#SFM Talking Point.
Good morning, Cathy and the fellow listeners. Can I be anonymous, please? The corruption in this country has hit another level. There are unofficial toll gates in this country, whereby cars, when they pass, they paid. Cathy, you won't believe me. Thank you.
Hello, Cathy. How am I right? It's Petros from Tembisa. Cathy, I'm concerned about Amapanyas. Amapanyas take bribe every day at Joburg Mall, Johannesburg CBD, right in Johannesburg CBD every day. Ethiopian people, they give you 200 every day.
Good morning, Sis Cathy, and all the listeners of SAFM. I'd like to say this today, Sis Cathy. Why the minister is earning a lot of money and is buying very expensive cars, and then at the end of the day is corrupt. Why they don't pay the police? Because some of the things that is make the police to be involved to the corruption is complaining about the salary. The money that the police is getting is very little, and the Minister of Police, he must supposed to check those things, because the police, some of the police now don't want to risk with their lives because of, at the end of the day, the salary is not enough. and the government must lift up the socks and check those things. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks for those WhatsApp voice notes. Yeah, look, I think that it's legitimate for police officers to complain about their salaries and maybe even make a case for why they believe they should be earning more. But that can't justify then why we have corruption. Surely it can't be that you know the job that you're signing up for. You put your hand up. You take that oath to be a police officer. You are the one that commits to, defending the public and to defending this country. So then how... we can't make excuses for it. We cannot make the excuses for it. Yes, the budgeting within the police absolutely has to be better. These are conversations that we've had previously, and one really understands the plight that many of these officers are facing on a day-to-day basis in their jobs. Bonakele, you're calling us from Kailicha. Good morning.
A very good morning, Cathy. How are you doing?
Good, thank you.
Yeah. Kulo was asking you, man, Kulo man. That Kulo does take a day off as well. Why is asking where were you? He must take a day, but he can't take a day off as well.
He was curious, so I decided to indulge his curiosity.
Okay, yeah. Now, look, I was interested of what was said by Colin Malachi, the president of the Youth League of the ANC, asking the ANC to talk to the EFF, you understand? So just to add on what he was saying, and Floyd joining, what is this?
MK Party, yeah.
MK Party, saying all sorts of things that he didn't like the ANC, blah, blah, blah. But just to add on what he was saying, why Malema doesn't just swallow his pride and apologize to the ANC and say, look, what happened, my friend Floyd left this party that we formed, I'm apologizing ANC, I made a mistake, and then he joins ANC back, you understand? Don't you think they will apologize? They will accept his apology?
No. Bonakele, do you think he must go back to the ANC?
Do you think now that Floyd joined the MK party, you think this EFF will grow? Because what I'm thinking, those who followed Floyd, you understand? Because each and every leader will have his followers, those who loved him so dearly, you understand? So do you think those people are not going to go and follow him to the MK party? You understand what I'm saying?
Look, I mean, I see that one of the student command leaders has now, issued a statement saying that he's going to join the MK party. Huh? I don't think that they did so much work building that party up, Bonakele, over the last 10 years or so. Mm-hmm. To give it all up, to go back to the ANC, dynamics in the ANC have changed. Where would that leave you on the food chain? The scramble it's a different kind of scramble. I don't know, Bonakele.
You know why I'm saying this? I'm looking at the leaders, those party members who joined this party and left this one and joined the other one. The example of that is Jimmy Mani, Mzwanele. How many parties? He was in the ANC, left the ANC,
ATM,
ATM, EFF. Now it's within MK party. Look where he is now.
Yeah, look, I won't lie, Bonakele. I was surprised over the weekend. When I saw the news of Bongani Baloyi, of formerly Shiluva, now also, formerly Shiluva for this cycle of elections, but of course his name is in politics. He made while he was in the DA, serving as one of the youngest mayors in Midvaal. And he's now gone to join MKP. Colleen Makhubela has now also gone to join MKP.
It's all about positions. That's why I'm also suggesting, if Malema can go back and apologize to the ANC, who will be given a position so that we gain, us as ANC, gain those members.
Yeah, but there's no guarantee that those people are going to vote for the ANC, Bonakele. There's a reason why they're not voting for the ANC right now. But anyway, let's leave it there. Bonakele out in Khayelitsha, making a call for Malema to go back to the ANC. And it does raise a debate, right, about the case for the small parties. And not small as in EFF small, but think about Shiluva. Think about the South African Rainbow Alliance. That's the party, SARA. That's the party that Colleen Makhubela was heading up. The people that supported those parties, that voted for those parties, what confidence are they going to have in the next cycle of elections? Perhaps to give their vote to somebody else. If it's so easy for these parties to disintegrate, right? Because that's exactly what has happened. Shonisani, you're out in Sandton. Good morning.
Thanks for taking my call.
Yes.
Before I speak about extortionists, maybe I should actually say the question we should be asking in terms of what you were saying with police knowing what they're signing for. The question then probably that needs to arise is, are they doing the job because they love it or because it was the last resort? There was nothing else that they can get in order to make a living.
Fair enough question.
Yeah, because if people are going to just be doing a job for the sake of it's my stomach and it's not what I love doing, we are bound to have things that are happening in this country. Same goes to the politicians who are jumping from one political party to the other and being given positions and then they do nothing.
I guess it also needs a sense of pride, right, in what one does.
Yeah, no one has it anymore. No one has it because you are not doing it because you love it. You are doing it for the sake of, I need to put food on the table. Which is what's happening with our politicians. They're also jumping from one party to the other, like you rightfully said. Positions, and it's just a position so that I can get something and put food on the table. I don't care about who's who. I don't care what's happening with the country. It's all about me. Then coming back to the extortionist issue, you know, this hurts so very much because it's not only with regards to extortionists, it's with regards to checks that are mushrooming, it's with regards to drugs, all these things started at a very, 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 very low pace and then they gained momentum. And it's not like when they start happening, no one is seeing this. The problem with us in South Africa or our government is that we are forever caught with our pants down. We are reactionaries. We are never proactive. You see one shack being put or erected somewhere there. You are a metro police officer or whatsoever. You pass. Until there's 10 shacks, then you want to remove people. And then our laws then say if you are removing those people, you must give them an alternative place where they can stay. You saw one shack, and if you had dealt with that, we wouldn't be where we are. Same to extortionate. Someone complained. No one acted. Look at where we are today, to an extent that even SAPS has lost the respect from any other person. If you confront people and they shoot back at you, then it means they don't respect you anymore. They are not scared of you. So where are we going with this? The next thing is people will be getting into house to house saying that for you to stay in your house safely, you need to pay.
Yeah, Shonisani, I think you're making some very important points and things are left just for too long. Things are left unattended for too long. In fact, you're reminding me of, I remember in a suburb in Lone Hill here in Johannesburg, just as you're coming out of Paulshof, there was, I remember in 2010, the first shack went up in that area. And, you know, it seemed like, okay, what's going on? Is anybody going to do anything about this? Where we are today is that there is an entire informal settlement in the middle of Lone Hill.
Yeah.
And the properties in that particular area, because there was a new complex that was built, the property prices have dropped astronomically because of what is happening. Nobody now, the people that invested in that complex have lost out on, yes, they've lost out on their money. And what are you going to do? You can't move those people out. You have to now provide alternative accommodation. But when the first shack went up and nobody did anything about it, what did we think was going to happen?
Yes, same as now on our freeways, you find people jogging in the morning. And as a motorist, you hit that person, you're going to be found at fault. And your metro officials, they can see these people jogging. They do nothing about it.
Yeah, Shoni Sandi, we're going to have to leave it there this morning. It's an important point. We have to stop being reactionary. But it requires leadership. It requires leadership. We need people with vision. We need people who actually have a plan. A plan that makes sense, a plan that is implementable, that people can understand, that people can run with, that lead with conviction, that lead with integrity, that lead with honesty. It's the open line. I'm taking your calls. 086 000 2032 is the number to dial this morning. 086 000 2032. You can send your voice notes on 0614 104 107. Takatayo, good morning.
Morning, Cathy.
Yes.
Thank you for taking my call. Cathy, I know it's been a long time we're talking about this thing of extortion. But Cathy, I was so shocked when I'm hearing our ministers, instead of coming with a solution regarding these extortionists, they are just giving us stats. I remember, I think it's one member of MKP who was saying the Western Cape is 60% of doing this thing of extortionists. We are aware of that, and this thing has been affecting the community for quite long. Maybe it's just coming to their ears just now that there is this GNU. Cathy, what we need, we as the communities, we need the government that is going to be sensitive and start tackling this thing to the complete fall. We don't want to see it anymore. Cathy, I'm staying in Delft. There was a project that was about to build houses for the poor people here in Delft. I think it was halted 2022, if I'm not mistaken, when the woman who was a manager there was killed. Up to now, Cathy, all the infrastructure that was laid there, I'm talking about the water pipes, drainage system and everything is collapsed because now it is taken back by those people who are stealing them. So it is shocking, Cathy, really, because we thought by now, because there's a lot of people dying. There was a mama there in Kraaifontein, 64 years old, who was killed. But our ministers, instead of just coming with a solution, Cathy, they are going to just blame each other. Your province is having 20%, that province is having 10%. I mean, where is our justice system, Cathy? Yes, people of South Africa, really, this is a homework to us who voted these people. But if they cannot stop this thing, Cathy, by the June next year, because I'm just giving them time, because even Mr. Mtunu said it's a matter of time, they are going to just see maybe an intervention from their intelligence and all the other law enforcement agents. But if they can't take it by June next year, Cathy, we must forget. Because really, it's not affecting them, but what about the country development?
You know, Takatayo, if we're to also understand the issue of the extortion gangs in communities, we have to go back to the forums, because when this started in the construction sector, and it started with groups that were then, opposing projects happening in communities, demanding that 30%, right? Which I think was it was a deliberate misinterpretation of government policy at the time. It was left alone. You understand? The president's first State of the Nation address, when he came into office, he spoke about the issue of the construction mafia and how that was going to be one of his priority areas coming into office. But look where we are today. the construction sector on record has said that they've lost billions due to the construction mafia. And so if you are unable to deal with it in the face of capital, where there are monies that are lost, what about where citizens are concerned, right? Because these are citizens that are often helpless. They're more vulnerable. They're more vulnerable.
Yes, the truth is, Katie, really, they are taking it light because it's not affecting them. Katie, if there was a guy from Long Street in Cape Town, he was a manager of Beer House. He said he was employing over 50 personnel, but now that Beer House is now closed because he can't take it anymore, because even the money that he was paying was not enough for these guys. Today they ask you 1 rand, tomorrow 3 rand, tomorrow is 5 rand. You end up having no money to pay them. So it is now not functioning anymore, that Beer House. In front of the government's eyes, I mean, Katie, this is serious. Our country is going to go down like Mexico. Thanks, Katie.
All right, Takata, you're out in Cape Town. Thanks for raising that concern. I'm going to take a break. I'm back with more of your calls.
At Ashupol, we understand the needs of those we serve. We are over 110 years old, and we are still here to serve you. Named Best Life Insurer by Forbes, would like to thank you for helping us grow and tell our story into the future. You made us the trusted insurer we are today. SMS serve to 44366 and we'll call you back. Ashupol is an insurer licensed to conduct life insurance business, an authorized financial services provider. FSP 53, T's and C's to apply.
The Warriors want to start their AFCON qualifier with maximum points. However, Harambee Stars want something delightful for the Kenyans. This is the Total Energies 2025 Africa Cup of Nations qualifier. Witness the beauty of African football. Kenya versus Zimbabwe on Wednesday, 4 September at 3 p.m. Live at your fingertips on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
We continue the conversation on The Talking Point. It is still the open line. I'm taking your calls on 086 000 2032. The number to dial on the WhatsApp voice note line 0614 104 107. Charlie, you're in Coffee Fontaine. Good morning.
Good morning, Cathy.
Yes.
Yes, man. I'm saying it's surprisingly what a couple of bucks can do and all the perks can do. The DA suddenly changed their stance on everything now. I mean, John Hazen is no longer talking about cadre deployment, and now their supporters are saying, no, the French or Arab guy is not cadre deployment because he's not deployed into the DA's office. What I do not understand is that this guy was headhunted by John Steenhuisen to come and work in his office.
Yes.
Yes, which is still going to influence the office of the DA, because every time the DA puts out a post, they don't say the Minister of GNU, they say the DA's minister. So basically means that they consider that office of John Steenhuisen the DA's office. Because every time they make a post on social media, they don't say Minister of Land and Agriculture, they say the DA's minister. So that basically means that yes.
And Charlie, for me, it also makes a mockery, right, of the statements then by the DA calling out other political parties like the NK for bringing in those fingered in state capture. Because it's like, but look at what's happening with you. This individual is a racist. And
they don't want to hear about that, Kitty. They don't want to hear about it.
And yet you're employing him and making him a chief of staff. He's not even qualified for the job, but you feel that that's justifiable. So
yes,
yeah.
I've always told people to be very, 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 to be wary of the DA. They are trying to lean to the right now. They are trying to gain votes that they lost to the EF, not to the EF, to the Freedom Fund Plus. These are the people who were very, very anti-China. anti-Russia. Look now. He went there begging China to open up their market so that they can trade with China. These are the people who wrote to the U.S. to ask the U.S. to come and intervene into our elections because they don't think it's going to be free and fair. Yes, South Africans, I'm telling you, open your eyes regarding the DA. The DA is a mouthpiece for the West.
Okay.
They remind me of what someone says, that the DA sees themselves as an extension of Americans and Europeans.
All right, Charlie out in Coffee Fontaine, that's Charlie's view there, but absolutely double standards when it comes to the issue of deployment, cadre deployment, but also racism, right? The DA has to show us. They have to show us that they actually care about racism, and with what we've seen so far. Don't forget, there's also Ronaldo Gous quietly going ahead with his work in Parliament. Don't forget that he woke up this morning for parliamentary duty. Don't forget that. Zwelakhe, you're in Bloom. Good morning. All right, it looks like we've lost Zwelakhe in Bloom. Theo, you're in Midrand. Good morning, Theo.
Good morning. How are you, Kitty? Oh, sorry to ask you how are you, but I'm well. I hope you're well.
Go for it, Theo.
I appreciate. No, my 2 cents is, as a young person, just trying to understand what is really going on, and one of our main issues as a country and as a people is that being exposed to money is our biggest problem, because now with the corruption that is going on, money is just floating around. And as someone who worked at a certain bank, doing what risk, basically, doing your EDDs, checking people's accounts for money laundering. So is that do we have enough systems for politicians, for a normal person, and how can we put these things in place? Even if I'm withdrawing money, are there anything that can be implemented so that money can't just be flowing around just like that? Because of, it seems like, and with poverty, increasing, people think, okay, if so and so did it, or like another gentleman just spoke earlier on, saying that police needs to get paid more, hence they are doing this. And we did say that no, but that's not justifiable. So meaning that the fact that money can move around so easily, and people know that in conferences, political conferences, people get money, or they are in hotels, they share brown envelopes. Then there should be things that we can do, because the issue is money.
Do you think, Theo, that there are ways in which the banks enable the money laundering by turning a blind eye? Because obviously you work on the back end, so you can see the transactions, you can see what's happening. But if nobody's going to raise any flag around it, then that's that.
I can say they are, but I can also say they are not. For instance, I can say, look, okay, I'll report this. I can pick up that there's something on this person's account. Okay, if it gets escalated and then it gets to, then certain people are linked to me or to that person that I've just flagged. Then if it gets stopped or they say, look, no, let's stop the investigation, which is what is happening in most institutions, private or public.
Sure.
That certain things get stopped. So how do we fight that? There should be things that are linked, certain systems that are linked to other systems, where if it's a red flag in the bank, surely it should register to the police or the Hawks. Surely it should register, so that one person doesn't have so much power to shut it down. At least few people have noted the issue, and then they can try to fight it, because now people get away with it, and then that's it.
All right. I hear you, Theo. Theo, out in Midrand, let's leave it there. It's a great suggestion, right? That because it's so confined, it's easy to shut down investigations, to cover up where there might be wrongdoing. And there has to be a way in which the systems speak to each other. We'll leave it there for this morning on the open line. Thank you all for calling in. Thank you for your WhatsApp voice notes. We'll get to those on the other side of the news update.
In our top stories, Tourism Business Council encouraged by revenue boost and Postbank suffers massive financial losses. Good morning. The Tourism Business Council of South Africa says it's encouraging to see rising revenue in the sector. This as the country recovers from a tourism slump due to the COVID-19 pandemic. September marks Tourism Month and the council says it has put in place several initiatives to attract local and international tourists to explore the country. The council CEO, Chifiwa Chibenga.
We do come from the time when COVID-19, decimated the sector. We had very few people traveling, whether it was domestic or international inbound. But since the lifting of all the restrictions, we've seen a great number of tourists coming back into South Africa from our source markets. These are usually the traditional markets of, Europe, North America, and of course the African continent. And we still need to grow in other markets like India and China.
The Communications and Digital Technologies Minister, Solly Malatsi, has revealed that money stolen at Postbank included social grants. He has confirmed referring the forensic report on governance and financial breaches at Postbank to the Hawks. The report shows Postbank suffered financial losses valued at nearly 89 million rand due to fraudulent activities that happened between 2021 and 2022. Malatsi presented the report before Parliament yesterday.
We have now referred the report to the Directorate of Priority Crime Investigation in a bid to ensure that those who are responsible for these crimes are brought to book. What makes this cash theft even more repugnant is that some of this money was stolen from vulnerable social grant beneficiaries and ordinary South Africans who were saving for a better future. We will use the full might of the law to fight anyone who dares rob citizens. I expect decisive action to ensure that public entities are run ethically and with integrity for the benefit of our citizens and not criminals.
The ANC Youth League says it has seen a trend in which amongst some government officials implicated in corrupt activities are attempting to avoid processes of accountability by simply joining the opposition. The League's President Colin Malachi made reference to some party members that have joined the Umkhonto weSizwe party. They include some high-profile figures implicated in state capture and were sworn in as MPs. Malachi has reiterated calls for ANC members accused of corruption to step aside. The League spokesperson Zama Kanyase.
It begs the question that why is it that during that era under the former president it was so difficult for us to make proper breakthroughs in terms of identifying and isolating all of those who are being accused of corruption. So now that they formed their own party, you can see that all of those who were going through the process of having to clear their names are being embraced. All of those who are delinquents in their different fields, they are being given serious positions of responsibility.
Infrastructure and investment are expected to be high on the agenda of the inaugural Africa Urban Forum, which gets underway in the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa, today. The conference will look at the various challenges facing African countries in the midst of rapid urbanization. Zoleka Kodashe reports.
According to data from the United Nations, 7 out of 10 people would be urban residents by the year 2050. However, some African countries are still light years behind in relation to infrastructure. As leaders gather in the Horn of Africa, they expected to zoom into this, as well as how to make the transformation agenda inclusive and sustainable. But urbanization is not cheap and will require massive investments. These, among others, will feature strongly as leaders gather to find ways on how best to build an Africa for the future. Zoleka Kodashe, SABC News, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Recapping the top story, the Tourism Business Council of South Africa says it's encouraging to see rising revenue in the sector. This as the country recovers from a tourism slump due to the COVID-19 pandemic. For SAFM News, I am Anne Musa.
The Mediterranean Knights are after the big prize, a win in the opener of the AFCON qualifier. But Amavubi differs and insists on traveling back home with a massive bag of 3 points. This is the Total Energies 2025 Africa Cup of Nations qualifier. Witness the beauty of African football. Libya versus Rwanda on Wednesday, 4 September at 6 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4 and SABCSport.com. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Ashraf Garda on SAFM.
I mean, who would you like to share a seat at the table with? Like someone you've never sat with, but you'd love to?
Wow, gosh, I can't imagine. Probably the president of Nigeria, because I'd love to really ask, what's wrong with South Africa and Nigeria, and how can we get it right?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, as someone who does lots of public speaking myself, emceeing, program directing, I'm always drawn to people who are so articulate, and you've always been that. I mean, how have you developed that presence?
Really, I think it's just that I've had so many opportunities, but secondly, I prepare. I don't just speak. I'm pretty fussy about what I'm going to say in public.
How would Naledi Pandor like to be remembered?
That I sought to serve our country and our people, and I never blemished the name of my family.
Naledi Pandor.
The National Pulse with Ashraf Garda. Weekdays, 3 to 6 p.m.
Feel like you're paying too much for car insurance? Be like 43-year-old Anisa, who pays only 1,289 Rand per month to insure her silver 2019 Toyota Hilux Raider e-cab with Outsurance. Get a quote from Outsurance today. SMS out to 30754. That's out to 30754 now. Outsurance is a licensed insurer and FSP. T's and C's online.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
You're listening to The Talking Point. Welcome to the second hour of the show. It's 8 after 10 o'clock. Coming up in this hour for Citizens Corner, we're looking at then the rise of extortion. We're going to try and unpack this issue with a panel of guests that we have lined up that will hopefully provide a bit of insight into this criminal phenomena and perhaps really also try and say what then needs to become the solution given where things are with extortion really hitting all sectors of our society. So we'll get into that conversation shortly. Before we do, your WhatsApp voice notes from the open line.
Hi, Katie. Morning. Me, I will credit this GNU. A petrol drop, electricity, no load shedding. They are watching after each other now. It's difficult for anybody to do any of the corrupt stuff. So, for me, it's working so far.
The Lesotho government has taken a decision to reserve some business and jobs for the Basotho only, which is a good thing that we need in this country also. But here's the problem. There are many Basotho that are selling fruits and veggies and makwenya and taxi drivers in South Africa. If South Africa implements the same policy that they have implemented in Lesotho, will we be labeled as xenophobic if we do the same thing that they're doing?
How's Cathy? This thing of the police are doing corruption because their salary is low. Look, they took an oath to say that will accept that salary. That salary is okay. If you see that the salary is low, then leave the police. Go drive a truck. Go and drive a truck. Then you will earn more money then. It will depend to which company you're waiting for. So I don't pay someone just because they say the salary is low. You sign the contract. It's concerning Northern Ireland.
Hey, this is Cathy and all SAFM listeners. Good morning. Sis Cathy, we must begin to ask ourselves, what is this protection or fee is all about? Clearly, to my own knowledge, it's robbery that comes in various forms, even including ugubeja. It's another form of extortion, of which this gets me worried to our daughters who might be victims of being abused because they will be looking for this kind of extortion. And therefore that will lead to the misunderstanding of love. This is Andile from Stegspruit in the Eastern Cape, near Lesotho borders.
Good morning, Cathy. The suggestion by other people who saying Julius Malema must go back to ANC and apologize, that is a big no. And if Julius can do that, he will regret after some few days. That will never be a good move at all. What Julius Malema have to do is to keep his EFF, and I'm telling you, EFF is going to do a very good job with or without Floyd Shivambu. He must hold on and soldier on. I'm Keshnam Kazi, Ndambi Village. Thanks.
Morning, Sister Cathy. I thought we will ask that guy who was praising the GNU if, like, these people who collect rent fees from protection fees, actually from our mothers who's selling amakwenya, if under this GNU government, if it's that the GNU and the unemployment rate is very high under this GNU, but he's praising the GNU. The crime is very high. He's praising the GNU. The poverty, but he's praising the GNU. No, it can't be, guys. We can love our political parties, it's fine, but not like this. Please. Thank you so much. It's Qenqa Shibasa here, Waqwathaza, Eqobo.
Comoros and the Gambia have a huge clash for 90 minutes in the AFCON qualifier. Both nations are optimistic for the significant 3 points. Yet the question remains, who wants it the most? This is the Total Energies 2025 Africa Cup of Nations qualifier. Witness the beauty of African football. Comoros up against the Gambia on Wednesday, 4 September at 5 p.m. Live at your fingertips on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Think bigger than just a banking partner. Think a team of specialized experts supporting you to make better financial decisions to enable your growth aspirations. Think a strategic partnership providing indispensable advice to help you make the right moves. Think bigger. Think Nedbank Commercial Banking. For more information, visit nedbank.co.za. See money differently. Nedbank. We're a licensed FSP and registered credit provider.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
Our Citizens Corner feature today focuses on the rise of extortion, and in recent weeks, of course, we've seen the reporting around these crimes increase. What we know in terms of the figures is that 4 provinces make up 73% of crimes related to extortion. These include KwaZulu-Natal, the Eastern Cape, Gauteng, and the Western Cape. Extortion is now linked to basic services, businesses, infrastructure, transport, and even nightlife. Yesterday, the Ministry of Police attended a plenary session. He was responding to questions from MPs during a debate in Parliament. Minister Senzo Mchunu addressed the plenary and said that they are working with provinces and municipalities to create operational plans. Before we listen to what the minister had to say, let me invite our guests for the hour on this topic on the show. Chad Thomas is a forensic investigator. Chad, good morning.
Very good morning to you, Cathy.
Fundiswa Mhlekude is an SABC reporter based in the Eastern Cape. Fundiswa, good morning.
Good morning, Katie.
Tshepo Mahlangu is president of Laska Tshwane Parliament. Tshepo, good morning.
Good morning, Cathy, and to the guests and to the listeners.
And Nditini Kido is a community activist and former chairperson of the Khayelitsha Development Forum. Nditini, good morning to you.
Good morning, Cathy. Good morning to the listeners and to my fellow panelists.
Later on in this conversation, we'll be joined by the Vice President of the Black Business Council. So I want us first to listen to the remarks that were made in Parliament yesterday by the Minister of Police, Senzo Mchunu, responding to questions by MPs about what the department is doing to deal with the increasing rates of extortion.
The gravity of these crimes alone, including extortions, is of serious concern to us over and above their concentration. Extortions have been emerging over time and has now reached levels where all communities in our country beyond the 4 provinces indicated above have become very angry, bitter, and agitated. The pain has gone very deep. The mood expressed in communities all around the country is also reflective of statements that have been made in the House unanimously against these crimes in the short past. Somewhere in the background, the current socio-economic conditions are militating against low crime levels in the country and need to be addressed urgently by this House and also by the executive. The modus operandi of the perpetrators involved in these heinous acts is well known. Most of them are individuals who do not want to work, but rather choose to parade as armies of murderous parasites that must be fought and rejected by society as a whole. The relative silence of communities and low reporting is all due to these fears. So we offer communities toll-free numbers, we communicate, we talk to them. There's a lot of fear out there. We must also mention that we see shocking incidents of lowest morality where church services, funerals, and other family-related functions get disrupted by these extortionists. Generally, there's more extortions going on in the communities than meet the eye. This requires more intelligent operations on our side. And we know we have to strengthen intelligence. We have to find information on our own in terms of profiling these criminals.
So those were the comments then by Minister Senzo Mchunu yesterday. I want to begin with Fundiswa Mhlekude, who is our reporter based in the Eastern Cape. Fundiswa, looking at that visit that was undertaken by the minister and police officials to the Eastern Cape to deal with the issue of these extortion rackets. MPs yesterday reflected on that, and not many of them had anything good to say about the visit. They felt it was more of a PR stunt and not really adequately addressing the issue at hand.
Well, Katie, all I can say is that after the minister's visit to the Eastern Cape, we have seen the arrest of those alleged extortionists, and only last week, all 5 of them were denied bail. All I can say, Katie, is that the situation is very dire, considering the fact that
the Eastern Cape is going through a recession. And the closure of the businesses, because remember that there are businesses that remain closed, that may have a negative impact on the already crippled economy, especially Upper Mthatha. And as I'm speaking to you right now, KT, there is a filling station that has been closed since February this year, and the local business people are scared for their lives, saying that they are also threatening to close shops because they say that these people, the money they demand exorbitant amount of money which they cannot afford because one of the businessmen here in Mthatha was saying that the extortionist said he must pay the 350,000 rand a month. So if quickly I can just paint the picture, how did this start? If I can just take you a little bit back now, this whole thing started last year in the area of Mthatha, where we experienced a series of shooting and killing of business people. I remember we would hear that some were even shot at broad daylight in the CBD. At the time, I suppose residents did not know that it was connected to the protection fee / extortion. In fact, we all thought that maybe it's just worrying business people. Well, that was until some business owners came forward saying that being forced to pay a protection fee. I think at the time we had already lost about 4, if not more, business people, if I'm not mistaken, because in a place here in Mthatha called Highness that sells food and alcohol, whose owner was shot and killed. And then there is 2 butcheries whose owners were also shot and killed. And then there is an owner of a guest house who was also shot and killed. So it was believed that business people were allegedly killed because they refused to pay the protection fee. So the situation is quite dire here in the Eastern Cape. And we also hear that these people now have escalated this issue to schools. And I hear that there is a salon at the Magira Street where hairdressers have resorted to closing shops because they've been receiving demands of paying this extortion fee.
Fundiswa, thank you so much for that roundup there. Fundiswa Mhlekude, SABC reporter based in the Eastern Cape. And I guess just listening to Fundiswa, one gets a full sense of how people's lives and their livelihoods have been affected. The number of people killed, the number of businesses that have had to shut down, that has real implications for the families that are depending on those that would have had these jobs. Chad, let's perhaps get into trying to understand how these extortionists operate. And it almost feels like when we say it's extortion, it's a sanitization of the full extent of the criminality that is taking place in this instance, especially after Fundiswa has given us examples of what has happened in the Eastern Cape.
Cathy, thank you. It's a very serious crime, and it's also a very underreported crime. And the reason it's underreported is quite obvious. People's lives are threatened. Certain people's lives have been lost. And the extortionists use violence to enforce the extortion that they're committing. So one must never escape the reality of what extortion is. It's a serious, violent crime that uses violence and threats of murder, and in some cases murder, to obtain their objective. Now, we've seen that extortionists go to great lengths. We had a situation in KwaZulu-Natal where a business was extorted into paying protection racket to be able to lay fiber optic cable for a community in a specific area. They refused to pay the money. The protection racket, the extortionist, actually drove to their company's head office in Gauteng, all the way from KwaZulu-Natal, invaded that office, and stole 3 million rands worth of equipment, which they said would make up for the lost money that they didn't receive in terms of the protection fees. To make matters worse, the insurer refused to pay, citing that it was most probably a civil dispute between the extortionist and the company, thereby giving credence to an illegal activity. It's unbelievable the lengths we are seeing these various mafias going to. Now, when you look at the South African context, it's not new. We've seen it in the entertainment industry, we've seen it in the restaurant industry, we've seen it in nightclubs, specifically in the Western Cape, where brute force is being used to obtain protection fees. We now see in informal settlements, barbershops, tuck shops, spazas are being intimidated and, in inverted commas, taxed by these so-called protection rackets. And then, of course, we've seen the 30% that has to be allocated to various people who pretend to be representing communities, taking these monies from organizations that are meant to be building roads, schools, clinics, RDP houses. Now imagine 30% of their budgeted amount means that if they give in to those extortionists, we're going to have inferior built buildings, we're going to have buildings that are not completed on time, and we're going to have people leaving the site with unfinished buildings. So it is a massive problem that needs to be seriously addressed by law enforcement agencies.
Chad, these individuals that had the audacity to drive from KZN to come to the company's head office in Gauteng, they did this in broad daylight. And so what that says is that there is an element of the criminality that is not even hidden. Because when people commit crime, one would expect that they want to hide somewhere. They don't want their faces to be known, to be seen. Is that what we are seeing with these, is it gangs, is it mafia groups that are running these protection rackets, that they actually go around and they don't have a problem with being known?
Exceptionally brazen. In the example that I gave you, the security company responded, saw that they were vastly outnumbered, called the South African Police Services. The police arrived. They engaged with this particular group of extortionists and said, what you're doing is wrong. You're claiming that you owed money because these people are working on a site down in KwaZulu-Natal that you claim you represent the community on. You need to settle this properly. Let's go to the police station. Let's negotiate. And they refused. They took this up and they left, and the police stood there dumbfounded. Subsequently, criminal cases were registered and it's under investigation. But it's the brazenness that's so shocking, but more so the violence that's associated with it. And this is what's so difficult to comprehend. It's a financial crime that turns violent very quickly. And if people don't comply, they lead by example by killing people. And that is what's so heartbreaking, is that people that are trying to make a living for themselves and their families, if they have got such small margins, that if they don't make allowances for the so-called taxation from these protection rackets, they can get killed.
Thanks for that roundup there, Chad. Tsepo, let me bring you in here as we head up to the news headlines. Of course, we are going to continue with this conversation on the other side of the headlines. But perhaps for you, your own impressions of what has been happening with these protection rackets, and perhaps what you have seen in Tshwane.
Okay, thank you, Cathy, again. Cathy, just to summarize it, South Africa is a mafia state, no doubt about it. No security whatsoever. The whistleblowers are not protected, hence the people cannot come forth and report these activities. From the civic association point of view, we are deeply concerned by this rise of extortion because there is a broader topic that we've brought today. Civics as associations needs to be regulated as well. Remember, there's an issue of undocumented foreigners. Now we are seeing the mushrooming of so-called civic organizations extorting money from the very same foreign nationals, claiming to actually chasing them away from South Africa, but those people are multiplying. You ask yourself, why are they not going? They are extorting from them. But the biggest extorter in South Africa are South African police services. They are not protecting people, they are extorting. Traffic officials are extorting. Municipalities, in Tshwane, for argument's sake, we've got a ring of extortionists who call people, threaten them with a disconnection of their services. If they cannot pay a certain bribe, they will come and disconnect them. That is an extortion, and it's known. There was a communication which was released by the City of Tshwane municipality a month ago that people should be very much aware. But they're not arresting those people because they are actually working within the system. So people will have come and actually identify those people. But South Africa is a mafia state. There's no person who can openly say, I know so-and-so who is doing extortion. But from where I'm sitting, I can simply say the slave queens in South Africa, through Mavuso, they are extorting. People are in jail for crimes they did never committed because these people are extorting. Informal settlements, it's flooded with foreign nationals who are connecting people illegally and extorting money from them.
Okay.
There is a job for sex. So, yes.
I'm going to ask you to pause it there. We're going to continue the conversation in a moment. It's 10:30.
A very good morning to you. With the news headlines this hour, ke Modupi Makhalemele. The Teachers Union NAPTOSA in the Western Cape has expressed disappointment over the expected cut of over 2,400 teaching posts in the province. The Tourism Business Council says it is encouraging to see rising revenue in the sector, and farm dwellers are accusing a farm owner of tricking them into moving to make way for a mining operation in Middelburg, Mpumalanga. Details of these and other stories coming up at 11.
Taking a look at your markets this morning, the rand currently trading at 17 rand 95 to the dollar, 23 rand 53 to the pound, and 19 rand 84 to the euro. Markets in Asia have extended losses at the closing bell. The JC's lower and mid-morning trade. Markets in Europe are weaker this hour. Gold's trading at $2,485, platinum at $904 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $73.16 a barrel.
They will all walk onto the pitch with victory on their minds, but the final whistle will reveal who wants it the most, who will display football brilliance. This is the Hollywood Bet Super League. Catch Mzansi Queens of the beautiful game. TUT Matatanta Ladies FC versus the University of Fort Hare Ladies FC on Saturday, 7 September at 11 a.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available at your fingertips on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the game.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
All right, we continue the conversation on Citizens Corner today, looking at the rise of extortion. Part of this conversation, Chad Thomas, a forensic investigator, Tsepo Mahlangu, president of Laska Tshwane Parliament, Nditini Chido, who is a community activist and former chairperson of the Khayelitsha Development Forum. And just joining us is Gregory Mufokeng, who is the vice president of the Black Business Council. Tsepo, I want to come back to you. You listed quite a number of things there in terms of extortion and extortionary behavior. What is Mavuso, and why do you believe that Mavuso should also be looked at as extortion?
Okay. People go to shebeens, go to pubs, under the impression that they're going to have fun. Then they pick up some ladies there, they have fun, they agree on what they agree on, they go to the hotels. In the morning, these ladies demand a certain amount from the guy. If the guy cannot pay that amount, they shoot and go straight to the police station with evidence that these guys have raped me, knowing very much this person is how they operate. It's like some sort of prostitution. Cash for sex. And that thing is underlooked, but many guys are in prison for a sin that they never committed because it was not agreed before that you are going to give me 5,000 rands after whatever they did. So this Mavuso phenomenon needs to be looked at as well. It's very problematic.
Nditini, as a community activist, your own reflections on extortion and how we are seeing that manifest itself in our communities?
Thank you very much, Cathy. And look, Cathy, first of all, we would like to really pass on our condolences to the families who may have lost family members due to this heinous crime. Look at it, the most pressing and worrying ones in the case of the Western Cape and Cape Town particularly would be where extortionists would demand a protection fee from emergency services personnel. One very worrying one would be when that happens to schools. Number two, on the abolition emptying vehicles, now which forces community members to stay in their shacks with human feces for a longer period of time because these cannot be emptied. This is a very, 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 very problematic thing. But at the same time, Cathy, as activists, we want to really express or allude the Minister of Police for finally having brought the city of Cape Town, at least last week they signed a memorandum of understanding to work together to deal with this type of crime. We agree with the Minister of Police that the crime of extortion, Cathy, is intelligence driven. Because you don't know when you see a person whether this person is actually an extortionist till such time that they act, and in most instances they act violently, and real people die for real. And it is our belief that communities need to unite. And Cathy, I must also hasten to make this other point. There was this debate yesterday in Parliament. I was really disturbed by the end remarks by one political party MP, Mr. Fadil Adams of the MCC, where when he closed in his remarks that colored people are not allowed to work in black townships in Cape Town. This is a responsible comment. And sometimes we get worried when politicians take podium and make inflammatory and divisive statements in the middle of a major crisis.
Nditini, when it comes to the expectations on communities, so everybody in this discussion has talked about how violent the nature of extortion is, and that often these people are armed to the tethers, and if police can stand by and watch them take things and rob a company and watch them drive off and not do anything about it, it shows you the full extent of what we're dealing with here. So practically then, what does communities standing up against extortionists mean?
Look at it. Standing up, as far as we're concerned, should be about communities uniting, number one, to lobby and advocate for their own development. Obviously not to stand in as a military force to fight for themselves, because that again is militarization of communities. And our view is that if communities uniting, working together, supporting the police initiative. Cathy, there are rotten apples within the police service, but also there are decent, genuine, and committed men in blue out there. There are community members who serve in policing forums, community members who serve in neighborhood watches, and all of these are volunteers. What is disappointing the most is that even when these people volunteer, they would still go on without proper PPEs and also without any form of support. So when we say communities must unite, we must unite ourselves as communities so that we can be our brothers keeper and our sisters. That's what we can do at the minimum. But mainly unite our effort to support the police to get rid of the scourge of extortion in our communities.
Chad, as somebody who's a forensic investigator, and you would have dealt with matters of extortion and really investigating and understanding these networks, is it something that communities can get involved in, actively involved in, and do something about it, as Nditini is describing?
We always speak about the expression that there's strength in numbers. If community members come together, they share information with the structures within the community policing forums, through their block watches, their neighborhood watches, their street committees, and this gets shared with the police, and the police can initiate some or other crime intelligence driven into this, they'll be able to succeed. The amount of good people that are against this far outnumbers the amount of bad people who are behind these syndicates. And if communities can just stand together and use these channels that have been created through the provincial safety and security officers, as well as with their local police CPF structures, they will play a key role in being able to disrupt and dismantle these organized crime syndicates.
Gregory, let me bring you in here. You, as the Black Business Council, of course, would sit with members that have been directly affected by some of these protection rackets. They would have probably, stopped certain projects from going ahead. Your overall sense as business about where we are with the rise of extortion, and the extent to which you feel there's been adequate steps taken to deal with it.
Cathy, good morning to you and to the listeners. Unfortunately, what we are currently witnessing is a total breakdown of law and order. We raised this issue in and around 2013, 2014, especially when it was starting to gain traction in KwaZulu-Natal. And we did say at the time that we need to nip this in the bud, because failure to do so will see this practice extending countrywide, and we'll be feeding a monster that we will not be able to control in future. And that's exactly what has happened. Now we are happy that we are here where everybody is now saying let's collaborate, let's bring our heads together and see how can we then collectively defeat this monster. The fact of the matter is that the police have failed to arrest this phenomenon, and completely failed, because if you look at where it started and where it is now, granted it was always there in the entertainment industry, as Chad has said. We always knew that when you open a club, you will have to pay some sort of a protection fee. When it then extended to other sectors, including construction, we then raised a very, very, very serious alarm at the time. And because we did nothing about it, it has now extended to all sorts of businesses, including street vendors. It is quite sad that it is where it is at the moment, but we cannot, of course, just keep on, crying and do nothing about it. So we are definitely, wanting to collaborate further to ensure that we do stop this nonsense. Unfortunately, it is costing lives. Unfortunately, it is costing businesses to close, affecting business owners and their families and their employers, their employees, and those that rely on them. So the impact is quite wide, and we do need now to act decisively to deal with this monster.
The breakdown of law and order, I think, is something that cannot be downplayed, because when all is said and done, Gregory, whether it is a company, whether it's an individual, when they call the police to come and help, they're expecting that the police are acting with the might of the state in intervening and taking action against criminality. That doesn't seem to be the case, especially, again, if you listen to the example that Chad has given us. There isn't a sense that when you call the police and report these matters, that there'll be intervention. And of course, that's then going to lead to low reporting levels.
Indeed. And the problem here, Cathy, is how the police have characterized this crime from the onset. They've always looked at it as an issue of a business dispute. And what is business dispute? When people come to your company and without bringing anything, to add value to your business, demand that you must pay them. And so that can be a business dispute. But because police have tended to deal with this issue as a business dispute and, to look at it as a socio-economic issue, to say, no, people want to also play a role in the economy. Now we must also afford them some space to go and negotiate with business people how they can do business together. And that's the problem here, that the police have never viewed this as a crime that needs to be dealt with decisively. And we now need to work together with the minister and the entire police force to say, how do we get these criminals behind bars and take them away from society, because they are adding no value at all, but they serve to distract businesses and to disrupt people's lives. So that's where we are. In the construction industry, Cathy, at the moment we are even thinking of militarizing construction sites, because there is just absolutely no way that we can see the police will turn around the situation anytime soon. You know yourself that politicians have now started complaining, including the Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure, as well as provincial MECs of Public Works and Infrastructure. They are now facing this problem head on. The Premier of the Eastern Cape, in his state of the province address, alluded to the fact that critical projects are now held to ransom by these people. Now we know them. The police know them. But nobody is willing to move to arrest them. So that's why we are also considering taking our own initiatives in some of these sectors to address this problem, because the police are simply not doing their work.
Tsepo, do you feel that when, as community members, you approach the police with these issues, that theirs is that they want to take more the role of a mediator and see how they can get the parties to sit and talk? It wouldn't be anything new, because these are the kind of reports that we've been made to understand in terms of how police respond to issues of gender-based violence, right? Where there's a crime that has happened, somebody wants to open a case, and the police, they discourage that person from opening the case and say, no, you guys go home and sort it out. Go have a chat and wake up in the morning, you'll be feeling a lot better.
Cathy, it's very much unfortunate that today we are discussing this topic, because the biggest extortionists and criminals are police themselves. They are the ones who are protecting the criminals, who are taking the bribes. You go and report a case, you will be dead. Before the end of the day, you will be dead, because they are in the pockets of these drug dealers, criminals, extortionists. So hence, the community members are discouraged now to deal with police. They are not trained, they don't have passion, they don't have a calling. They're just there to receive money, take bribes and all that. I mean, if the police were doing their job, definitely, because they are armed with guns, dockets and everything. Now they expect the residents to come and report, knowing very well that these people will be dead before the dawn of another day. So we are actually very concerned with the political will. There is no political will in South Africa.
Anonymous, let me bring you into the conversation. You're calling us from Durban. Good morning.
Good morning, Cathy, and your guest. How are you?
Good, thank you, Anonymous. Go for it.
Good. Okay, Cathy, it's very fortunate that I had the first-hand experience with this. In fact, it emanates from these business forums, this thing of extortion. So basically, you can blame police as far as you can, but I myself was involved in another project that had to do with this extortion thing, and we involved the police, and the police were willing to help on this thing. But the problem is the police will only arrest someone when he has committed a crime. So they did everything, because these people are clever as well, and they are well resourced, and they have all the money to hire the best lawyers. So they started with this thing of intimidating. You see, when it was purely intimidation, they will come with guns, and they got arrested with that. So they saw no putting them into trouble, and they started hiring bodyguards. So now it's an indirect intimidation. So you'll find one person come to negotiate with you, having 10 people around you with AK-47s as if they are bodyguards. So that was indirect intimidation. And you can't tell the police that they need to arrest, because he's only asking if you can give that 30% on your business. Nothing much, nothing less. And the police need to detect the criminal elements or on that conversation or intimidation thing. And it's not happening. You are just, you got intimidated by the people that are around you with these big guns. So there is another thing that I needed to raise. The problem is these people, they threaten and kill people because these are known criminals from the communities. Now they move into this thing of extortion or business forums. So what happened is, you see the big companies like Transnet, they're having properties that are owned by Transnet. You go to Durban like Montle, there are lots of properties that are owned by Transnet in Montle. Transnet handed over to those business forums those properties because there is a collusion. There is a lot of corruption in this thing. You can look at it in a criminal way. There is a lot of corruption in this thing. These forums, they collude with the internal staff of Transnet. It's either way they get this staff gets intimidated, or this staff they are gaining out of that of those negotiations or conversations, because there are lots of properties that are owned by those business forums that belongs to Transnet. There are properties that are on Point Road, two properties that that are on that road. They were just handed over freely like that. There are properties in Montle. They were just handed over freely like that. There are properties in Hillcrest. They tried handing all those properties over, and someone fought in Hillcrest. And Transnet was able to bring in lawyers because that area is having a value for Transnet in order they sell those properties. But in other areas where all these houses are there, they are all handed over to forums. And those forums are renting those houses out. So this thing needs to be investigated thoroughly. It's not just a conversation whereby, no, these are extortion. These people are well-resourced. They're having good lawyers. They are getting advice. And they are being fed with information before approaching a certain business by internal people in the business.
Okay. All right. Anonymous, thank you so much for that perspective and also sharing those insights with us. Mike, you're in Newlands. Good morning.
Good morning, Cathy, and your guests. I also have first-hand experience involved the AK-47 stuck to the head of my, well, not mine, in fact, but the supervisor of this building site on some land I sold here in the Ottery area. So I know what it's like, and we try to call the police, which are right across the road. They just didn't even bother to come out and investigate. They were just simply not interested. But if you step back for a second, Cathy, and look at the optics of our country, we've got it's as your one guest said, there's no consequences. They can get away with absolute murder. People look at the optics and they say, well, hang on a second. We've got the Minister of Justice. She's just been involved in $1 million rands of bribes and heaven knows what else, who's going to now answer to the President of our country, who himself is involved in money laundering. The message is clear. Go out there, extort, do what you like, you will get away with it. And I just want to bring to your guest one final point. The biggest extortion that is taking place and will become the biggest historic extortion in this country is the 30% that the ANC is demanding from Elon Musk. They are not allowing him to trade in this country because they want 30%, not for anybody else, but for their own back pockets. And if you can stop and you think of the billions that we are losing at the moment just through the building enterprises, can you imagine the buildings being lost, the billions being lost to these schools, homes, little properties out in the middle of nowhere, Cathy? They would have the fastest internet connection in the world for little money. That it would bring so much employment into the country, but the ANC says, no, we want it for our own back pockets, more cars and more houses. And that is the biggest scandal this country is currently facing. Thanks, Cathy.
All right, Mike, thanks for that view. Chad, let me come to you and perhaps then ask you about the organized nature of these criminal syndicates. Again, if you listen to what our listener Anonymous was saying, is that these organizations, not these organizations, but these criminals seem to be very well funded.
Yeah, well, it's organized crime, and organized crime, just like any other business, budgets specifically for their different projects. And one must understand that organized crime will flourish where you have a disorganized police force. And our police force hasn't set out to be disorganized. The fact is that they just don't have enough members, they don't have enough qualified detectives, they don't have enough funds or resources. The figure at the moment is that there's 180,000 people employed by SAPS, of which 150,000 are actual police officers. This is way below the internationally accepted figure of police officers per capita. If you look at one police officer to every 100,000 people, we sit here at about 200. We should be at around about 350, 400. Those figures internationally don't take into consideration the nature of violent crime in South Africa. So we need to capacitate crime intelligence, we need to capacitate the National Prosecuting Authority, and we need to ensure that our police are organized and fit to take on this fight. Because without those resources and capacity, we're just going to carry on with a losing battle.
Gregory, in your view, did the preferential procurement regulations, and this was around local beneficiation, and that requirement that was set by Treasury, I think it was around 2016, around there somewhere, around 30% of contract values needing to be subcontracted to local divisions. Do you think that that policy is what has created this behavior that we are seeing? Because there does seem to be an entitlement to business activity that really shouldn't be there.
Indeed, Cathy, the 30% that, in fact, we worked collaboratively with the National Treasury to introduce in 2017, in fact it was, the regulations of TPPFA of 2017, has been hijacked by criminals. That's a fact. And the reason why that is so is because government plans themselves, did not capacitate themselves to implement that measure effectively. Now, what it required, even if you go into the regulations and you read those regulations carefully, you will see that there was an expectation that the clients themselves will then organize to the local communities so that there is no disorganization when they approach a contractor, for instance, that was given an opportunity to build whatever infrastructure in that locality. Because the problem, Cathy, was that big companies and some of the main contractors going into communities used to bring all sorts of resources from outside of the community. And we were trying to remedy that, to say, look, it's always best that once the project is completed, you can see the benefit that is accrued to the community, not only in the form of the asset, but also financially that, community members will have benefited, and through the skills that they will have been, given an opportunity to acquire by being trained and by being actively involved on that project. So the clients failed to do their work in terms of organizing the communities, and that is the vacuum that was created, and hence the local business forums mushroomed, took advantage of that, and at the later stage, now real criminals came in and hijacked all of that, for their own nefarious acts.
Nditini, to conclude this conversation then, how do we turn things around? Yes, communities must unite and work together. They must help to give information to the police. But if Tsepo says the police are the biggest extortionists themselves, then what are the options really on the table?
Thanks, Cathy. Look at it. Community activists in their own nature are agents of social transformation. What Gregory just said, the goodness of the 30% principle needs to be protected by genuine community activists. We as community activists, as agents of social transformation, we can never give in to criminal elements to change the trajectory, the developmental trajectory that our country is taking. We must mobilize society, Cathy, to work together. This is a whole of society problem, which requires a whole of society response. Thank you very much.
Tsepo,
Yes, Cathy.
I often get worried, and Nditini, this is not, slighting you, but when we say it's a whole of society problem, what that often means to me is that then nobody's going to solve it, because it's just so broad, it's just so open-ended that often it comes to nothing. Tsepo, what do you think then can actively be done to try and deal with this issue?
Casey, we call on the business and the residents in this country to organize themselves, because what we are dealing with here, it's an organized crime. So organized crime will only be fixed through organized communities. Obviously, the police will just involve them, but we know for sure that a criminal cannot investigate a criminal. So that is a gray area. But if the communities come together and unite against all this, number one, there is something that we need to discuss one day, Cathy. It's very worrisome and people are actually downplaying it. Municipal mafia. The local governments, that's where this tender premieres and all this starts, because we've got municipal mafia where they extort from the poor. Then we've got civic association mafia. Those politicians masquerade as residents' organizations, knowing very well that they are actually those mafias who actually torment our residents. There are hijacked buildings. We've got bogus landlords who are extorting from people who are renting from hijacked buildings, stealing our electricity and water, consuming for free, even in informal settlements. So this requires the whole residents and business to come. We actually want to call an imbizo in November, where all business sectors and communities and the police come to the fore and we discuss this.
We're going to leave it there for this morning, and absolutely lots of food for thought in terms of how this problem of extortion has literally proliferated so many different aspects of our day-to-day lives. We'll leave it there with this conversation. Let me thank all of my guests for their contribution. It's time for your latest news update.
The top stories at 11, protesting miners fired in the Northwest and concerns over teachers' job cuts in the Western Cape. A very good morning to you. The Horizon Chrome mine in Kataganyani near Rustenburg in the Northwest has dismissed over 140 workers who staged an underground sit-in last week. The workers were demanding a salary increase. They say an entry-level miner earns about 6,500 rand a month, which they say does not match the work done and the dangers that they face underground. The Teachers Union NAPTOSA in the Western Cape has expressed disappointment over the expected cut of over 2,400 teaching posts in the province. The Provincial Education Department last week announced that 2,407 jobs would be cut next year due to the national government's budget cuts. NAPTOSA's Ridwan Ahmed says the intended cuts will severely impact the quality of education.
We are aware already that we have overcrowded classrooms, and the projected teacher-to-learner ratio of 1:36.7 in our view does not in reality translate into the classroom. And so therefore to cut further posts at this stage within education will place a further burden on the education system. Also keeping in mind, for example, that our educators are already in a challenging situation with overcrowded classrooms, and the well-being of educators for us is also very important.
The Tourism Business Council says it is encouraging to see rising revenue in the sector. This as the country recovers from a tourism slump due to the COVID-19 pandemic. September marks a tourism month, and the council says it has put in place several initiatives to attract local and international tourists to explore South Africa. The council CEO, Tsifiwa Tsivenga.
We do come from the time when COVID-19, decimated the sector. We had very few people traveling, whether it was domestic or international inbound. But since the lifting of all the restrictions, we've seen a great number of tourists coming back into South Africa from our source markets. These are usually the traditional markets of, Europe, North America, and of course the African continent. And we still need to grow in other markets like India and China.
Farm dwellers are accusing a farm owner of tricking them into moving to make way for a mining operation in Middelburg, Mpumalanga. The farm dwellers on the Biestepan farm claim that they were relocated to another portion of the farm 2 decades ago. They say they were provided with houses and misled into believing that they owned them. However, they were not allowed to erect new structures or start businesses on the farm. It's alleged that the families which do not have anyone working on the farm are being told to vacate their houses. And a former aide to New York Governor Cathy Mohlahlana has been charged with secretly acting as an agent of the Chinese government in exchange for millions of dollars in compensation and gifts. Linda Sun, a former deputy chief of staff to Mohlahlana and her husband, pleaded not guilty at a court in Brooklyn. Prosecutors say Sun and her husband used their ill-gotten gains to purchase real estate and luxury vehicles. More from the BBC's Carl Nasman.
There are some 10 criminal counts here in this indictment. They include visa fraud, money laundering. She helped Chinese officials allegedly travel to the United States. She even changed some messaging about China in official documents and official speeches on behalf of New York's governor. So really having her hands allegedly on the state's messaging, the state's way it dealt with the country of China. So potentially really a pretty high-level access here when it comes to the way that New York handled its foreign policy.
The top story at 11, the Horizon Chrome mine in Tathaganyane near Rustenburg in the northwest has dismissed over 140 workers who staged an underground sit-in last week. For SAFM News, Kemodupi Makhalemele.
So why should I use We Buy Cars if I want to sell my vehicle?
Because We Buy Cars buys cars.
But will I get the right price?
Of course. We Buy Cars buys thousands of vehicles and knows exactly what every vehicle is worth. Their buyers deliver exceptional service and pay you immediately.
And how do I know what they'll pay for my vehicle?
It's easy. Visit webuycars.co.za or use the We Buy Cars app. Follow the simple steps and voila, you'll know your car's value in no time. We Buy Cars. Quick, easy, the best.
The Warriors want to start their AFCON qualifier with maximum points. However, Harambee Stars want something delightful for the Kenyans. This is the Total Energies 2025 Africa Cup of Nations qualifier. Witness the beauty of African football. Kenya versus Zimbabwe on Wednesday, 4 September at 3 p.m. Live at your fingertips on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
Good morning, Cathy. Thank you for the nice show. I want to comment on extortion. Me, I used to Zamazama at a place called Fund Ryan near Kingsway, there in Springs. Every Sunday, the police used to come to that place and collect money from everyone who's doing Zamazama. Even the ladies who are selling pap and cold drinks and stuff. They collect money so that they leave us and work in peace. And they even informed us when an operation was coming. They tell us, guys, on this date, you must be ready. There's going to be an operation, so you must be careful. So, extortion, my sister, from a long time has been there, Long time has been there. Even the police are involved.
The police themselves warn the miners of their raids and operations? Really?
Hello, Cathy. Why don't y'all bring in the SANDF to help for the time being until this whole business is over?
Oscadi, the defense system, the intelligence, and the justice of this country, they are all sleeping. But not just sleeping, but snoring concerning this thing of extortion. We are living in fear each and every day. People are not able to run their business in peace. Thank you. It's Victor in Elodale.
Good morning, Cathy, and your guest, your expert guest on the show. It's very insightful, the things he's saying, and I feel like our president Cyril Ramaphosa has done us wrong by actually substituting a loud minister to a calm minister. However, both of these two individuals who occupy that cabinet do not have the necessary expertise, and I feel like we're just doomed for failure in the country. This thing is going to continue going on for the mere fact that we have a police minister who does not know the job. You can tell the man doesn't know the job, but that's just my opinion. This is going to be a very difficult and complex situation to handle. Daniel here in Bryanston.
Good morning, Cathy, and good morning to SFM listeners. Cathy, I would like to find out something, because nowadays everything negative, everything bad are put on top of foreigners' head. This goes wrong, foreigners. This goes wrong, foreigners. These new groups of construction mafias, those new extortionists, those who were killed by the police in KZN, in Cape Town, the identities, are they foreigners or are they South Africans? I just want to know. Thank you very much. Anonymous, Cape Town.
Cathy Mohlahlana on SAFM.
Yeah, we continue the conversation on the talking point. As somebody says, Cathy, you live in a fantasy. Is it really living in a fantasy? Where the state of breakdown in some areas of the police is that when they are performing a raid, they tell the criminals, so we are coming for a raid, so just act cool, guys. Keep calm, relax. We have to do this because, we're ticking the box. But when we get there, you know that we have to do what we have to do, but nizoba right, you'll be okay. Can we say that as South Africans we accept that is how bad things have become when it comes to law enforcement in the country? I don't know. Well, we're going to change gears completely for our final conversation this morning. And we're going to look at political party funding. The IEC, of course, releasing its data for the first quarter of the 2024-25 financial year, and stating then the political parties that have made declarations. 14 political parties have made declarations for that particular quarter, and it sits at a total of 190 million rand that has been declared. Joel Bergman is a senior researcher at My Vote Counts. He joins me for this conversation. Joel, good morning.
Hi, Cathy. Nice to chat.
Michael Atkins is an independent elections expert. Michael, good morning to you.
Hi, good morning.
So certainly in terms of the reporting cycle and the parties that we're seeing reporting, it's 14 parties. It's still a drop in the ocean compared to the number of political parties that actually participated and contested in the election. Should we be worried about that? Joel?
Thanks, Cathy. So my vote counts is quite pleased on the face of it that we are seeing disclosures made during this past period. And I'm sure listeners will be aware that for the past few months, up until August, there was a lacuna in our party funding legislation, right? That meant that there was actually no legal obligation for parties to make these disclosures. So it is quite encouraging that parties have come forward and we have this information. But we can't say with certainty that this is representative of every single donation that should have been disclosed. We must also take into account that while there are, many parties that contest, it is the bigger parties are always going to be able to secure the majority of large donations.
And for you, Michael, while my vote counts as feeling positive, of course, this is the highest number of declaration that we have had so far since the reporting began. Are you confident that the switch with political parties is taking place around how engaged they are in this process?
Look, I agree with Joel that the reporting is encouraging. Obviously, the law doesn't have all of the teeth that it might to be able to check and to query, perhaps an absence of declarations that might be surprising. So it is an encouraging development and trend, but there's a lot that we don't know, and there's no easy way to find those things out. For example, it's been in the news this week that Action SA is challenging the IEC on the matter of the sort of supposed donation that allowed the ANC to settle their outstanding debt a few months ago. So there are questions, and there's probably areas in the law that could be improved.
Joel, when we look at the figures objectively, one thinks, okay, 190 million rand. This was during the peak of the election cycle. Are we to believe that for the political parties that have declared collectively that they would have spent only 190 million rand or somewhere around about that for the election campaigns?
No, I mean, we know that elections cost a lot more money than that. The big parties spend hundreds of millions of rands on general election campaigning. But we can't look at this only in isolation, right? So parties have other sources of revenue, which isn't always and falls under our political party funding legislation. So parties take out loans from banks. They have investment vehicles, which don't always, which can lead to not disclosing those sources of information. And we are, it's also possible that we are going to see in the future disclosures that there will be information there related to payments that were made sort of during this time. But no, 190 million rand is, like you said, a drop in the ocean of what this actually costs.
But what does that do then for the effectiveness of this mechanism? Because behind it was, a principle of transparency, right? That if we know who's funding political parties as the electorate, then we're able to make really informed decisions about who the parties are likely to be listening to or to having around the table, or who's likely influencing, right, these individuals. So if then the reporting itself is not giving us a clear picture of who some of these players might be, is it effective?
Well, if I can come in there, there are questions, obviously, about the effectiveness of the legislation. I think it's clear that we have made huge progress in terms of transparency and accountability since the legislation became effective 3 years ago. And listeners are perhaps not aware, if I can from the outside, remind people of the work done by My Vote Counts over many years in litigating and pushing for this kind of transparency. But we do need to see from now what can be done to improve the transparency and improve the confidence that the numbers we are seeing reflect the reality.
So what then are we to read, Michael, into the current data?
Well, some of where disclosures are made, they're interesting. And so people can draw conclusions on those. There are some questions. So, for example, there are questions about certain foundations, and are foundations being used to channel money from some of the individuals who are donating in any case. And while I cast no aspersions on the particular situations, asking questions is not an insult or a slur in a democracy. So, for example, we are the people who have donated to Rise Mzansi. You know, we don't know a lot about where that money has come from. It's a relatively new organization. So, you know, the disclosures, the fact that they raise those questions is a really positive step for our democracy. And as I say, I think some of us think that the legislation can go further and we can build on the work that's been done up to now.
When we look at these disclosures, Joel, even for the first quarter of the year, we're not necessarily seeing a lot of new funders coming into the system. It seems to be, you know, the same, by and large, the same group of people that is funding political parties. What does that tell us about the state of our politics, but also the interests in these political organizations?
I mean, that's very much the case, Cathy. And I think what it speaks to is the fact that we have a small group of wealthy individuals, organizations, businesses that dominate the funding of our politics and that hold potentially a disproportionate level of power in influencing our politics. Something that My Vote Counts is working towards. We're conducting research around, trying to understand what a better mix of funding would be. And potentially we think that public funding should maybe be something we should look deeper into. I mean, parties collectively get, I think, more than 1.5 billion rand every year in public funding. And that might be a way to minimize sort of private interests.
I'm looking at some of the funding that came through for Action SA. They declared just over 13 million rand. An organization like Build One South Africa, they declared 12.8 million rand. The IFP, 38 million rand. Rise Mzansi, 33 million rand. So, these are significant amounts of money. What does that tell us about these political parties? Because these are political parties who are contesting these elections for the very first time in 2024. Joel?
Sorry.
Go ahead, Michael. Go ahead.
Briefly comment. So, South Africa is a young democracy. We are transitioning from the apartheid era. We all understand this, and we all understand that the pieces didn't just drop into place in 1994. We are developing and growing. And so as certain parties are coming forward to try and change some of the picture of the landscape of our politics, the fact that some of those have drawn funding, to my mind, is not hugely surprising or sinister. It is a reflection that there are people in the country who are saying, we need to, in a way, try out different options in the country and different configurations of what our politics can look like. And I see it as part of the maturing of our democratic environment.
And if I could just add to that, Cathy, I think what we also see is donors donating to multiple parties. So, it's sort of a hedging of bets. They are, if they are agreeing with the vision of that sort of party or that sort of sector of parties, so if they fall within the same sort of general ideology, we are seeing that donors don't necessarily only donate to a single party.
One of the concerns that many South Africans had was around parties that were, or organizations rather, that were NGOs that were donating to political parties, but it wasn't really clear about what these NGOs do. How far should the work of understanding the funding of political parties be going? So to what extent should members of the public also be asking questions of the donors themselves? So if you look at an individual like Martin Mohlahlana, who of course is a regular donor to some of these parties, should Martin Mohlahlana be asked, well, why are you actually funding political parties to the extent that you're doing? And you seem to be sort of very clear about who it is that you will fund. What is your interest in this? Joe?
I don't think we'll get to the point of sort of expecting or forcing donors to come forward with their list of reasons for funding. I think what's important is the transparency element. So knowing who the donors are. And it might be, it's all good and well where we can identify an individual like Martin Mohlahlana. But when you have, as Mike mentioned, We Are the People and other entities which, where you go and see CRPC and they don't seem to be registered, you can't find the directors, you don't actually know who they are. I think that's more troubling. So I think, to expect donors to sort of lay out the laundry list of what they're doing, I don't think that will happen, but we need to know, who's actually making these donations.
Michael?
Yes, I agree. I don't think in an open democracy anybody can question the motivation of an individual. We have the freedom to vote for whom we wish. We have the freedom to donate or to work for any political party. But I do agree that any of those foundations, we need to see whether they are being used to channel money, in a sense, to hide the origin of the money. And I mean, I'm not saying that is the case. But, we don't have any information. But these are questions that should be asked in our environment. And I think the law does need to go further in this respect.
What makes a donation from We Are the People, which of course has donated significantly to Rise Mzansi, what makes that different to a donation perhaps from another NPC such as Voices of South Africa Foundation? Michael?
Look, again, I don't see a major difference, between the two that you mention. If we know the background of the organizations, it would be good to see the money flows, because, if there's a transaction and it's just really a pass through, then there is a concern. There are other entities where the origins are known. So, for example, the two trusts that donate to the ANC, we know those were set up for the ANC, and there are their own questions around that. But the two that donate to the ANC, that's not in a way sinister, because there's no real indication that is a way to hide a donation. We know the background of Chancellor House. We know the background of the Botho Trust. So, I think it comes down to the particulars, and it would be good to have more information about the particular organizations that are donating.
But if I go back to what Joel has said, Joel is saying that there isn't a point in this process where donors themselves actually have to then answer questions. So about, why it is that they're funding political parties, or even what the source of those funds is. Does it not become a bit of a red herring then? I'm not saying it's right, but I'm just saying that in terms of the consistency of accountability, is raising questions around whether or not We Are the People is a legitimate NPO that is funding an organization like Rise Mzansi. Does that not become a red herring in the broader context of what else is expected from the other funders?
If there was, for an example, an organization that raised funds by getting small donations from people across the board, and it was known that these were small, and if it was known that NPO was going to fund various political parties in the interests of furthering democracy, then there would be no problem, because there's no hiding. I think the main concern is not so much the motive of giving. That's up to the voters to see the declarations and make their decisions. I see the main problem as whether an organization is used to hide the source of funds and hence get round the legislated limits. That's the main question. We can't question people's motives because we have freedom. We have the freedom to make political choices.
And then
just hang on for me, Joel. We're going to continue the conversation in a moment, and I'll give you a chance to jump in as well. We're looking at political party funding. So you heard some of the numbers. You heard some of the organizations that are funding these political parties. What does that tell you? What are you reading into how funders are choosing to distribute their funds across political parties? I'll take your contributions on that. You can send through your WhatsApp voice notes on 0614 104 107. It's just after 11:30. Time for your latest headlines.
Thank you very much, Cathy. And with your headlines, good morning. The Midvaal municipality in Gauteng says it has written to Eskom and the energy regulator NERSA to object to the power utility's proposed 40% plus electricity tariff increase. The Horizon Chrome mine in Tlatlaganyane near Rustenburg in the northwest has dismissed over 140 workers who staged an underground sit-in last week. And Teachers Union NAPTOSA in the Western Cape has expressed disappointment over the expected cut of over 2,400 teaching jobs in that province. And those are your headlines. A full news update coming up at 12.
Unlock a world of benefits. Welcome to SABC's TV License Rewards program. Ready to make your viewing experience more rewarding? Say hello to perks that go beyond just watching TV. Join us today at sabctvlicenserewards.co.za and instantly receive your first reward. But wait, there's more. You can get up to 500 Rand back. Become part of something bigger, a movement where watching TV isn't just a hobby. It's a catalyst for positive change. Register now at sabctvlicenserewards.co.za and open the door to a world of benefits. Plus, every time you tune in, you're making a difference. T's and C's apply. Remember, TV license fees aren't just payments. They make a difference.
Only the final whistle can reveal who are the real football kings of East Africa. Neighbors won't get along during the East African Derby. This is the Total Energies 2025 Africa Cup of Nations qualifier. Witness the beauty of African football. Tanzania takes on Ethiopia on Wednesday, 4 September at 6 p.m. Live at your fingertips on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
You're listening to The Talking Point. Our final conversation this morning is looking at political party funding. Joel Bergman is senior researcher at My Vote Counts, and Michael Atkins is an independent elections expert. We've been unpacking some of the numbers, and I think the important conversations around trying to understand what is behind the reporting and paint a picture really of what we're seeing emerge. Joel, you wanted to come in here, and this was on the issue of the question marks that have been raised, in particular around some of the NGOs that have funded political parties. And I think we've highlighted We Are the People that has donated to Rise Mzansi. That had a lot of question marks around it, but of course they have continued to fund the organization.
So I just wanted to stress, that I think our own subjectivities can't come into this. If we don't agree with the politics of a certain donor, that shouldn't be the issue. As long as we continue to deepen transparency in this space, that's something My Vote Counts is going to court for later this year, which is one of the points of relief we are seeking. I think that should be the focus. As long as but we must push for and ensure that we know who these foundations are. Because as Mike said, that is one of the key ways in which secrecy can continue to occur in party funding.
In terms of the point that Michael was raising, that yes, these NPOs don't have to explain why they're funding certain political parties, but there must be a level of clarity around the source of their funds. How do you think that organizations like yourselves, Joel at My Vote Counts, can go about seeking that transparency? Because, of course, We Are the People has denied sort of any of the allegations around them being used as a vehicle to hide the true source of these funds. But that's the explanation that they've given on record. What more can be done to try and get clarity and to try and get answers?
So, we can either do it through strengthening our legislation and putting in place laws that compel deeper disclosures where this information becomes known. We can do it through PIA requests, through using our access to information legislation, and then we can also do it through putting pressure on political parties. Voters, the electorate, or the public has a right to know this, and they voted, parties into power, and it should be evident as to where they get their funding from.
What are the concerns in terms of the source of funding? What are the worst case scenarios, Joel? Why is it important that we know where the source of these funds come from?
So, the Act already, lays out some of these sort of issues. They can't be from proceeds of crime. The donation from foreign donation is quite heavily limited. So the point is that if you keep on tracking the funding and it bounces from A to B to C, the source of the fund is essential, right? Because we have to understand where if they were legitimate and if the donor had the ability to actually make that donation. It's around legality, I suppose.
Michael, when we look again at the funding, a party like the ANC, it is still the biggest party in South Africa, but again, it seems to be sitting quite sort of a little bit lower down on the list in terms of the amount of money that has been declared. Do you think there's an underreporting from the ANC, or that they're genuinely struggling to raise funding?
I would be reluctant to express an opinion that might lead to me being sued for defamation. But the first thing to point out, the ANC has had the largest share of the public funding. So we have to realize that, there was an extra allocation approved in December So in a sense, the election year is almost like a double year in terms of public funding. So the ANC would have had around 300 million rand in public funding, through this election period. So it's not as though they don't have other sources of income, as we discussed earlier. But there are clearly concerns about whether parties are spending greatly more than the declared funding. And obviously the ANC, those questions are going to be raised. The EFF have not declared any donations except for the donation in kind, which MTN gave, obviously SIM cards and whatnot to the EFF and to the ANC. So yes, those two parties, and then there are questions in Mkhonto weSizwe, although they're a new party, they have clearly spent quite a lot in terms of election campaigning, events, gear, so those things, there are visible manifestations of campaigning, and as yet we're not seeing the source of those funds.
Add to that, perhaps a party again like a Change Starts Now, Michael, because at the time that particular organization was launched under Roger Jardine, there was an impression that there was a significant amount of money that they'd been able to raise to contest the elections, and one looks at their declarations, 150,000 rand.
Well, look, obviously, by the time this quarter started, we knew that Change Starts Now was no longer contesting the election. So the large donations came in the previous segment. The fact that that donation, which is registered against Roger Jardine himself, the fact that that donation comes through is rather telling, because clearly that donation in itself, there's nothing odd about it. The party would still have incurred some costs, even after it was no longer contesting. The question which perhaps you and the media should be asking the party is whether they returned donations that were made previously. That would be an interesting thing to find out, because given that they weren't contesting the elections, the prior donations would seem to have been enough to carry them through. So I don't see anything sinister in any of the prior or current declarations there, but but this is the great thing about the legislation. It raises questions. People can go and ask and find out. We're not just left in the dark.
Joel, when it comes to what you believe then, the future of transparency around political party funding is, do you think that this legislation has changed the way in which donors interact with political parties? Because we know that the parties themselves have said this is it's making life difficult, that they're unable to raise funds as a result of this.
So our position has always been that people or businesses should be able to proudly and publicly make donations. That it's not political donations should not be a dirty word. That you should be able to support and put money into the vision you want to see for the country. The fact that parties may be experiencing difficulties in getting donations has to do with the history of what happened when there was secrecy and unfettered movement, right? And that's why we have things like the Guptas and Bosasa. So if parties, it's just maybe the case that donors are more hesitant because of their reputational interest, right? That they want to donate to parties that they know are going to be clean and following, democracy. So I don't necessarily agree that that from day one, parties have been saying this is we're gonna struggle to do this. But we really have to balance out the rights of our political rights and then the needs of political parties.
Michael?
Yes, I think I understand the reluctance, and certainly in the past, for example, the DA declined to respond to the PIO requests on the basis that others weren't doing so. So, one-sided declarations in the past would clearly have been problematic, and we understand the reluctance. you know, there could be people who would donate but would be afraid to show that they are supporting a political party, perhaps those that may have, let's say, government contracts in one place but want to donate to a different party in a different place. But I agree with Joel that the overall imperative of transparency and openness overrides some of the difficulties that parties may experience, from particular donors. It's just we have to have it out in the open. And yes, there may be consequences, but people need to adjust to that new situation.
Michael Atkins, Joe Bergman, let me thank you both for your time and your contributions to this conversation. And both of them, of course, are correct. The reporting is improving, but we still have a long way to go. All right, that brings us towards the end of the show for today. The Talking Point will be back with you again tomorrow between 9 and midday. Have yourselves a lovely afternoon.
Here's what real clients say about Outsurance. Here's Fundi, 46 from Brackenfell.
They give me lesser amount for my car. 523 rand on my 2013 Hyundai iX35.
Monica, 39 from Three Rivers, pays just 1,515 rand a month for her 2018 BMW 320i.
Give Outsurance a call. You can't lose.
SMS out to 30754 now. That's out to 30754. Outsurance is a licensed insurer and FSP. T's and C's online.
Only the final whistle can reveal who are the real football kings of East Africa. Neighbors won't get along during the East African Derby. This is the Total Energies 2025 Africa Cup of Nations qualifier. Witness the beauty of African football. Tanzania takes on Ethiopia on Wednesday, 4 September at 6 p.m. Live at your fingertips on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
SAFM, leading the conversations that move us.
It is alleged that the Libyans have been in the base since April.
So how long have police intelligence been aware of this facility?
To be frank with you, at this moment, it's something that also during the visit by the minister it was indicated that cannot share much on the things besides the information that was received by the intelligence structure. There were other information from members of the community.
Wow, a security camp used for military training. Why are foreign nationals being trained in security or guerrilla warfare or whatever it is in South Africa? If South Africans were in another country being trained for those purposes, my word, they would be regarded as terrorists, it would be treason, they'd probably be locked up by those countries and everything.
Update at noon with Sakina Kamwendo, midday to 1 p.m.
The book reading. Please note that the views expressed in this book are not that of the station. Listeners' discretion is advised. SAFM presents another episode of A Life of Purpose, written by Luvuyo Wachela and Lumkile Wiseman Kuhlu. The reader is Lerato Velase.
Fort Glamorgan, on the western banks of the Buffalo River mouth and near the docks of East London, became Wiseman's first prison, built in 1847 as a British fort and transferred to the Cape Colonial Government's Department of Prisons in the 1880s. This jail had earned a notorious reputation by the early 1960s. Set in almost impregnable, robust stone buildings, it had been renowned as the detention center for political activists. Many arrests in the course of the clampdown of MK and Boto were incarcerated there before their transfers to Robben Island. Reflected in the lyrics of Miriam Makeba's song In Exile. Bahleli bonke etilongweni, bahleli bonke kwanonunu. They are sitting together in prison. They are sitting together in the callous one. It became one of the many brutal South African prisons identified with fierce apartheid arrests. It also served as one of the main internment centers for many hardened criminals in the Borderkai area of the Cape Province. Some of the Poqo convicts and those who were implicated in the murder of the white family near Mbashe River were also jailed at Fort Glamorgan. At the tender age of 19, Wiseman found himself in this infamous jail. There were no arrangements to separate living spaces and manual labor for the different kinds of prisoners. Groups of nearly 30 political prisoners were each squeezed into separate cells, but during the day they sat, ate, and worked together with common hardened criminals. During the day, we would work in the quarry, loading stones on the cocoa pan, and we would push it to the crusher. So the whole day, think of it, we were young, in our teens, in hard labor with hardened criminals. Remember, when you are exposed to criminals, they fight every day and sometimes kill each other. In prison, there are gangs, and these would, for reasons known to them, fight each other. We were at risk of being killed. So that was one of the things that gave us a fright. The dehumanizing prison regulations and their severe implementation by prison warders were even more humiliating. The worst was the strip search carried out daily by young white warders before the prisoners moved into the prison yard on their return from work sites. Each prisoner was required to strip naked in front of the prison guard and throw his clothes aside before jumping up while opening his legs. It was very humiliating. The purpose was to check for smuggled-in items. Tobacco was the most sought-after item, even though prisoners were not allowed to smoke. Sometimes newspapers were secretly brought in because political prisoners were desperate for current information. Some would even bribe guards or maintenance workers to receive it. At the time of Wiseman's arrival in September 1963, Fort Glamorgan was swarming with prisoners from the massive arrest of the PAC and Poqo affiliates who referred to themselves as Ama-Afrika, Africans. Many were from Port Elizabeth and outlying areas. Others were from different areas of the Ciskei, and there were even more from the Transkeian territories. These groups, corralled in overcrowded cells, contributed to turning many an evening's chat into a political discourse. The Lovedale group, for instance, shared a cell with a PAC group from Tentani, led by Walter Toboti and including a militant Mkai brothers. They enjoyed singing liberation songs, and Wiseman learnt a lot from the group. Quite often, he gave political addresses. For instance, as a student of Sidzamba and Mabuya, I would be asked to talk about Pan-Africanism. I would talk about why the PAC broke away from the ANC and also the earlier revolutionary phase of the ANC when Xuma was challenged by Moroka and the Youth League of the ANC came up. Of course, in those phases, we would always highlight the unique role of the guys like Mda, who broke away with Sobukwe to start the PAC. The contents of these discourses were recited without reference to written material, since that could not be permitted inside the cells. As one of the most devoted apprentices, Wiseman sometimes took on the responsibility of lecturing to other political inmates without the guidance of either Sidzamba or Mabuya. Many political prisoners, even those convicted of violent acts, warmed up to these lessons. For some, they became influential rites of self-education. At times, political education invoked passion. It also enlivened the spirit and even the prisoners' fervent hopes that they would soon be liberated. That year, 1963, was also inspiring to many of those involved in the South African political struggle, since it was the year of the formation of the Organization of African Unity, OAU. Kwame Nkrumah, who was at the vanguard of that OAU initiative, was primarily a Pan-Africanist, and his stature to Wiseman and his fellow prisoners was prodigious. They could relate to his achievements, and the constant rhetoric of the United Liberated Africa gave them hope that the NP government would soon be replaced by an African one. The year passed, however, without changes other than continued arrests, the best known of which were those that led to the Rivonia trial from October onwards. Meanwhile, Wiseman and his group continued their political classes in their cells. In the excitement of the lessons, groups in their cells would occasionally sing during the night. Not surprisingly, those non-stop singing rituals led to the cruel disciplinary action. When we did that, there would be no meals the following day. A young boer in his 20s would appear at the prison gate and would say, "Geen maltjie," for making the noise. The harrowing Fort Glamorgan prison life slowly unfolded for Wiseman. It had been a traumatic experience for him and his Lovedale colleagues to find themselves confined by prison walls at such a young age. But after nearly 8 months of being acquainted to the life and practices of Fort Glamorgan, they would be moved to a very different place. Making acquaintances and seeing Africa from Robben Island. Out of the blue, on the Good Friday evening of 1964, Wiseman and some of his fellow political prisoners, including the Kentane group, were abruptly assembled. Fumbata Mxenge, who was under 19, was exempted from this roundup, and David Kambula was bailed out by his family, but the rest were ordered to line up in pairs and were changed to each other at the legs. They were then loaded into the back of a police truck without any explanation of the journey to come. The unexpectedness of it has been vividly recalled by Wiseman. We got called out and loaded into vans, chained. We get into this van and we were driven. We had no idea where we were going or what was happening. In darkness, boom, when we finally recognized that we were in Cape Town, we realized what was happening. We're being taken to Robben Island to meet more colleagues. As expected, the trip was horrendous, for chained, breathing human beings compressed at the back of moving police vans for endless hours, deprived of normal ablution facilities, with no proper seating other than the hard metal surface. It was excruciating. Their lack of knowledge about their destination for much of their journey added to their ever-growing anxiety. There was more menace for a fatigued Wiseman and his fellow prisoners as they reached the sea at Cape Town. There are risks when you are chained to someone else like that, trying to move forward, jumping into the ship, worrying about missing your step and falling into the sea. But God was on our side. Nothing happened. Robben Island, about 7 kilometers west of Cape Town's Blouberg Strand coast, awaited them. The island had been used to isolate political prisoners as early as the end of the 17th century and continued to do so under the British colonial government. During the Second World War, it was fortified as part of the defenses of Cape Town. By then, it was also used as a prison, and by the late 1950s, it had a few buildings. Apartheid authorities were still extending construction on the island early in 1964, anticipating more incarcerations. Wiseman and his colleagues were at first locked up in zinc cells.
That was another episode of A Life of Purpose, second edition, written by Luvuyo Wochela and Lumkile Wiseman Kuhlu. The book is available online on www.kmmr.co.za, KMMR Publishers, and in all leading bookstores countrywide. It is broadcast on SAFM at 11:45 Monday to Thursday on The Talking Point. It is produced for the station by Vovi Patala, read by Lerato Mvelase, technical production Wiseman Manqele and Nanda Khoza.
Sakina, you know, we are vindicated as the Patriotic Alliance because at local level, we have always said that the DA is very arrogant, is very rude, it wants to be the boss.
And this is very unsettling. If it's unsettling for us as politicians, it's also unsettling for the citizens. And you can actually feel the crispness in the air, Sakina, that the people are tense.
Deputy President Kenny Kunene, and we also have African Christian Democratic Party's spokesperson in Gauteng, Bishop Dalton Adams.
Sakina Kamwendo on SAFM.
It's 12 o'clock on Wednesday, the 4th of September 2024. A very warm welcome to Updated Noon here on SAFM. Leading the conversation, I'm Sakina Kamwendo. Coming up in the next hour.
Most of them are individuals who do not want to work, but rather choose to parade as armies of murderous parasites. That must be fought and rejected by society as a whole.
Police Minister Senzo Mchunu says that acts of extortion around the country has angered communities and...
Indeed, there's a great deal of interest on both sides, and we are one unique country where investment flow is not one way.
President Cyril Ramaphosa has appealed to the business sector in China to invest in South Africa. Coming up in sport.
Another medal for Team South Africa at the Paralympic Games, and I'll try and explain qualifying for the Africa Cup of Nations finals.
Interesting. John Chirika with those details in the second half of the show. We always want to hear from you. Please get in touch. You can write to us via X or Facebook at SABC News_radio or use the hashtag Updated Noon. You can also send us a WhatsApp voice note on 082692399 or send us an SMS to the number 41391. It will be charged at R1.50 per SMS. Well, these are more stories coming up on this Wednesday edition of Updated Noon. First, though, is the latest news with Modupi Mohlahlana.
Thank you very much, Sakina. The top stories at midday. The Midvaal municipality objects to electricity tariff hikes and over 100 protesting miners fired in the northwest. A very good afternoon. The Midvaal municipality in Gauteng says it has written to Eskom and energy regulator NERSA to object to the power utilities proposed 40% plus electricity tariff hike. Eskom has reportedly submitted a proposal to NERSA for tariff increases of 43% in 2026, 3% in 2027, and 11% in 2028. This comes as consumers grapple with high food inflation and further increases in rates and taxes. Midvaal Mayor Peter Texera says this will have a severe impact on low to middle income households.
This proposal is completely unrealistic and does not take into account the tough economic realities faced by many of our people. This is why I have requested a meeting with Eskom and NERSA to express our concerns and dissatisfaction on behalf of the people of Midvaal. My hope is that we can find constructive solutions rather than shifting the burden into paying customers who are already struggling with the rising cost of living.
Mine Workers Union NUM says it'll challenge the decision of the Horizon Chrome mine in Tlatlaganyane near Rustenburg in the northwest to dismiss over 140 workers who staged an underground sit-in last week. The workers were demanding a salary increase. They say an entry-level miner earns about 6,500 rand a month, which they say does not match the work done and the dangers they face underground. The mine is yet to react to the union's move. Teachers Union NAPTOSA says some schools in the Western Cape are seeing a reduction of up to 10 teacher posts. The Provincial Education Department has announced that 2,407 jobs would be cut next year due to the national government's budget cuts. NAPTOSA has expressed disappointment over the decision. The union's Ridwan Ahmed breaks down how temporary and permanent educators will be affected.
For contract educators, their contracts will not be renewed with effect from the 1st of January 2025, which means that they will be unemployed. And so that is a challenge for NAPTOSA. And then the permanent educators, they will be declared what we used to call in excess. The new term is additional to the staff establishment. So if you are permanently employed, you will be carried additional to staff establishment if you have been identified as in excess. And then the department has a process of attempting to suitably place these educators.
Police watchdog IPID has opened an inquest docket after a man died of suspected smoke inhalation at the Morokweng police station near Vryburg in the northwest. Police say the man died in a police truck. Spokesperson Sabata Mohlahlana says another person, a 24-year-old man, has been admitted to hospital after sustaining burn wounds.
The man allegedly burned while at the back of a truck in the early hours of Tuesday morning at Morokweng police station near Ganyesa outside Vryburg. The pair was allegedly and temporarily kept at the back of a police truck that was parked at the station. Internal departmental investigation to determine circumstances that led to keeping of the man in the truck have been instituted.
And the U.S. Justice Department has announced criminal charges against the top leadership of Hamas, including the Palestinian militant group's chief, Yahya Sinwar. The department has announced that the charges relate to terrorism, murder conspiracy, and sanctions evasion charges against 6 senior leaders of Hamas. A correspondent, Sharon Price Peace.
In a statement, Attorney General Merrick Garland said the DOJ had charged Yahya Sinwar and other senior Hamas leaders of financing, directing and overseeing a decades-long campaign to murder American citizens and endanger the national security of the United States. Garland charged that Hamas operatives led by the defendants, that include the deceased Ismail Haniyeh and Hamas commander Mohammed al-Masri, murdered nearly 1,200 people, including over 40 Americans, and kidnapped hundreds of civilians. The AG also said they continue to investigate the murder of Hersh Goldberg Poland, the 23-year-old American-Israeli among 6 hostages killed by Palestinian militants just days ago. Sherwin Brashby's SABC News, New York.
The top story at midday, the Midvaal municipality in Gauteng says it has written to Eskom and the energy regulator NERSA to object to the power utilities' proposed 40% plus electricity tariff hike. Back to you, SK. For SAFM News, Kemudupi Mahalemele.
Update at noon with Sakina Kamwendo, midday to 1 p.m. Update at noon with Sakina Kamwendo.
Thanks, Madupi, and good afternoon, everybody, at 7 minutes after 12, and thanks for being with us here on Updated Noon. So, looking at our diary this afternoon, we'll bring you up to speed with what President Cyril Ramaphosa had to say earlier on. This was at an event on the sidelines of the FOCAC summit that will kick off later today. And this is, of course, the Forum for China-Africa Cooperation Summit. And the President was addressing international investors in Beijing in China, and speaking to them about investing in South Africa. We'll play some of that for you. Also today, we'll go back and find out what's happening in the Standing Committee on Public Accounts, that's SCOPA. And today, we're expecting a briefing by the SIU on the medico-legal claims, including their impact on the financial health of the health sector. And also expecting briefings by the Auditor General on Transnet financial performance, as well as irregular and wasteful expenditure, governance issues, human resource controls, deviations and expansions, as well as accruals. And we've got Abongwe Kobokana watching that for us, but you'll remember yesterday the SCOPA chairperson, Songezo Zibi, was telling us that what is on their diary for the rest of the week. So these are some of the reports that or briefings, I should say, that they are expecting for today. And then a local organization is launching a campaign targeting schools in New Brighton and KwaZakele in the Eastern Cape, this to address safety concerns and to prevent criminal activity. As to what exactly that entails, we'll try and find out. And the quality of judges is declining, but more acting judges are being employed to clear case backlogs. And the Judicial Service Commission has become a political football. That's according to a report entitled How to Appoint a Strong Judiciary that was released on Tuesday, that was yesterday, by the Centre for Development and Enterprise. Also watching what's happening in the courts, and the Senzo Mayiwa trial is on in the Pretoria High Court, and also the trial of rather against 3 men accused of killing a German tourist resumes in the Mpumalanga High Court sitting in Mbombela. So those are some of the stories that we're hoping to update you on.
Update at noon, midday to 1 p.m.
President Cyril Ramaphosa says that the integration of African economies is critical to the growth of the continent. Ramaphosa was speaking at the first day of the Forum for China-Africa Cooperation Summit, currently ongoing in Beijing. Now, President Ramaphosa added that South Africa and China have ties and are seemingly tied at the hip, and he also reaffirmed the country's commitment to the BRICS Forum. Here's the president elaborating.
African economic integration is becoming a fast reality. The value of cooperation goes right across our continent. The growth of the South African economy will be pivoted also on the success of the African Continental Free Trade Area, which opens up access to a market of over 1.3 billion people. Now, this in many ways creates enormous opportunities to expand production on the continent and to stimulate much greater economic growth. We're rather pleased that a number of Chinese companies that are steeped in the manufacturing sector are already taking advantage of this and utilizing the platform that is being created by the Africa Continental Free Trade Area and using South Africa as a very strong base to export, to manufacture and export their businesses out of South Africa. In conclusion, let me thank you for your participation in this business forum. I can see not only with the number of people who are gathered here, but also with the issues that were covered as reported, that indeed there's a great deal of interest on both sides. And we are one unique country where investment flow is not one way. There are a number of South African companies, as I had David Ferreira reporting here, that are invested from South Africa in the Chinese market. So there is mutual interest in our two countries and two business people to invest in each other's country. And the trade is two ways as well, although we still need to balance that. So we are joined at the hip, and that is why I say South Africa and China, having concluded this all-round comprehensive strategic cooperative partnership between President Xi and myself, it lays this great foundation that we can all utilize to speed up the processes of investments, of business dealing, of trade between our two countries. So all this calls on us to work together to seize this opportunity as business people and continue to build a more prosperous future for our respective peoples in China and in South Africa.
And that was President Cyril Ramaphosa speaking earlier at the Forum for China-Africa Cooperation Summit, which is currently ongoing in Beijing.
Sakina Kamwendo on SAFM.
Now, the Centre for Development and Enterprise is calling on the new Chief Justice, Mandisa Maya, to play an active role in reforming the Judicial Service Commission so that the country's best legal talent can be selected as judges. The CDE says that the quality of judges is declining and more acting judges are being employed in order to clear case backlogs. The Centre for Development and Enterprise has released a report titled How to Appoint a Strong Judiciary. And for more on this, we are joined on the line by Anne Bernstein, who is the Executive Director for the Centre for Development and Enterprise. Ms. Bernstein, thanks for your time. Welcome to Update at Noon.
Great to be with you. Thank you for the opportunity.
First, tell us just a little bit about the report and exactly how you conducted, the research or whatever it is that you did to come to the conclusions that you are sharing with us.
Great. So for the last 8 months, CDE has been collaborating with very senior people in the country, former civil servants, business leaders, experts, lawyers, and others to try and answer the most difficult question that faces South Africa, which is, after 15 years of decline and stagnation, what can the new government do to get us back on track? So we've been working on this to the exclusion of anything else for the last 8 months. And this is the 4th action report that we've come up with on priorities for the new GNU. And so that's the one part, the answer to your question. The second is that we have been working with a range of lawyers and legal experts in order to think about the JSC and how we appoint judges in South Africa and what is going wrong. So that's the background to the report we released yesterday, which I think in terms of the panel we had for the discussion yesterday, former Judge Robert Nugent, Jeff Bundler, a very senior advocate in the country, and Bekezile Benjamin from Judges Matter, they weren't endorsing the report, but they were saying exactly the same things that we're saying in our report. And that is an example of, I think, the prevailing view among the top people in the legal profession in South Africa today.
So when we talk about the quality of judges declining, let's talk to that, in specifics, because we know that the case backlogs are ridiculous in South Africa. And as you also point out, and as we've seen, there are more acting judges being appointed in order to try and clear those backlogs. But in terms of the quality of the judges declining, what is the cause of that?
Well, look, think about it this way. We have had a series of interviews by the JSC over a number of years now, where they've been so appalling that they've been taken to the High Court or the Supreme Court and generally been told, or they've decided to settle, that they have to change their approach. They've been accused of irrational deliberations, excluding highly qualified people, and then not recommending enough judges to the president for appointment. You need to recommend 4 people to the president for him to appoint 1 vacancy. So the courts have found the JSC processes to be, they've been instructed by the courts to change them. So what happens, and there are a number of judges who've come out publicly to say this, what happens is very good candidates often appear at the JSC. They're either humiliated, they're generally not asked about legal questions, but it's politics or all sorts of other extraneous issues. And so increasingly, really good people are not putting themselves forward. So the JSC is having to make decisions when they can make them based on a much smaller pool of people that are not including the leading lawyers in the country. So that's one of the things that's happening. And what we're seeing now is that the JSC is unable to get enough people to stand up to be interviewed. So earlier this year, they called for interviews after last year's interviews had to be abandoned or, didn't result in the appointments. This year, in April, they had interviews, and there weren't enough people to recommend, 4 people to the president for the one vacancy. They've called for interviews again in October. Not enough people have come forward. I don't know what happens next, but clearly the JSC is failing to provide the right environment and processes to attract enough judges, and certainly leading judges, to stand up to be judges. That's why we have so many acting appointments, and that's partly, not totally, partly the reason for all the backlogs. We're appointing people who keep postponing their judgments, in some cases for months, in some cases for years. And they clearly weren't ideal candidates to be judges if they can't make a judgment. So this is a very serious situation. We're talking about the third branch of government, the judiciary. And we're talking about a weakened judiciary at the very time when the official opposition for the first time in democratic South Africa is saying they do not support an independent judiciary and they want to trash the Constitution. Very serious situation.
So the CDE has called on the new Chief Justice, Mandisa Maya, to play an active role in reforming the Judicial Service Commission. And listening to what you've just said, do you have any recommendations for her, or what would you like to see in terms of that reform of the JSC?
Absolutely. So as Jeff Budlander, SC, former Director General in the Mandela government, said yesterday, he said that in many respects that the chairing of the JSC by the Chief Justice over a number of Chief Justices over the last decade and a half has been like a traffic cop, sort of your turn to speak or your turn to speak, rather than as a leader who says this is how we're going to conduct interviews for these very important positions. So we have seen a failure of leadership. And one of our we have a number of recommendations. Firstly, the Constitution lays down how you appoint people to the JSC. This is from Parliament, a number of politicians, the legal bodies, the president himself, and others. And we're really saying the first thing is that we don't think the appointing bodies have taken seriously enough the kinds of people that are needed on the JSC to do this very important thing of interviewing and selecting judges. So we're saying they need to be held accountable for this, and that Parliament has a duty to not just take anybody from each political party, but to consider with great seriousness who is appropriate to put on the JSC from Parliament and everybody else who nominates people. So that's one recommendation. The second is that the JSC itself needs to apply its fairly new criteria for judicial interviews much more consistently for each candidate. The third is that the JSC is chaired by the Chief Justice, And we're saying this is a really important role. And this needs leadership. It needs leadership on how we're going to conduct our business. The JSC appoints judges, they interview judges, they deliberate and then make recommendations to the president, and they also discipline judges. And they need to do this with great seriousness, and with the Chief Justice in the chair needs to lead more effectively. We have a number of other recommendations. The most important is, and we know this is a constitutional change, that we think the balance of who sits on the JSC might have been appropriate 30 years ago when we wrote the Constitution, but it's not appropriate today. There are too many politicians and there are too few judges. Judges they're not perfect, but they're the best people to say, having listened to lawyers in their courtrooms day after day after day, they know what kinds of people would be good judges or who wouldn't be. So we need a greater balance of judges on the JSC who in turn need to lead, to say from their experience what the requirements of a judge should be in the future. So the composition of the JSC is very important. And then choosing a judge is not simple. It's hard. You've got to look at the person's legal record. You've got to look at their references and what their peers are saying about them. Do they have the right work ethic? Do they know the law? Do they have the right understanding of the Constitution, etc., etc.? So this is not simple. And if you've got a whole lot of candidates, the JSC needs more research support. That's the one point. And then more broadly, the judiciary needs additional support from the executive for research, for better, a lot of the courtrooms are now in very unsafe areas. They don't have proper IT and other basic support services. So you undermine the judiciary and the rule of law if the executive doesn't fund the judiciary properly. And we would say the same about the JSC. Individual members of the JSC need support in this enormous business of really assessing individuals properly and their legal record properly in order to make the best possible appointments.
Well, we'll have to leave it there. Very interesting. Thanks for your time. Anne Bernstein, the Executive Director of the Center for Development and Enterprise. And they have, of course, called on the new Chief Justice, Mandisa Maya, to play an active role in reforming the Judicial Service Commission, among other things, so that the country's best legal minds, the best legal talent can be selected as judges. But quite a few recommendations. She spoke to some of those. We'd love to hear your views as well.
Update at noon, midday to 1 p.m.
Now, Police Minister Senzo Mchunu told the National Assembly how acts of extortion around the country have angered communities. Mchunu was delivering his statement outlining the actions taken by the police to deal with the threat that's posed by those committing acts of extortion in South Africa. Mchunu's statement generated intense debate from opposition parties, as Mercedes Percent reports.
Minister Mchunu says 73% of crimes in the country, including extortion, happens in the Western Cape, Eastern Cape, Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal. He says extortion is now seen countrywide.
Extortions have been emerging over time and has now reached levels where all communities in our country beyond the 4 provinces indicated above have become very angry, bitter and agitated. Pain has gone very deep. The mood expressed in communities all around the country is also reflective of statements that have been made in the House unanimously against these crimes in the short past. Somewhere in the background, the current socio-economic conditions are militating against low crime levels in the country and need to be addressed urgently by this House and also by the executive.
Mchunu claims that most of the perpetrators who commit extortion are individuals who don't want to work.
The modus operandi of the perpetrators involved in these heinous acts is well known. Most of them are individuals who do not want to work, but rather choose to parade as armies of murderous parasites that must be fought and rejected by society as a whole. They are often armed, operating in groups, and instill fear and chaos. The relative silence of communities and low reporting is all due to these fears. So we offer communities toll-free numbers, we communicate, we talk to them, but there's a lot of fear out there.
During the debate, MK Party MP David Skosana highlighted how poverty and unemployment are some of the social ills that can lead to acts of extortion.
Lawlessness and poverty have become a defining feature of the ANC of Mr. Ramaphosa. The MK Party has observed a sharp increase in extortion cases. This is a troubling indicator of the country's economic struggle. Compared to the glorious years of His Excellency President Zuma, the current surge in extortion incident coincide with a significant rise in unemployment, economic downturn, and the scarcity of opportunities. It is ironic how the years of His Excellency President Zuma were dubbed the wasted years.
Skosana also used the city of Cape Town as an example, with economic exclusion of the majority, saying it's no surprise that it has more than 60% of extortion incidents.
The city of Cape Town, under the DA leadership, has 64% case of extortion. Quite interesting. They say where they govern more than any other proper. This phenomenon is not unexpected given the city history of economic exclusion, where Africans and colored communities have been systematically marginalized from participating in the economy of this country. The stark reality is that business is predominantly owned and operated by white individuals, while employment opportunities are often afforded to foreign nationals, leaving local residents to face limited job prospects, particularly in the sector like hospitality and domestic work.
The EFF's Mbuyiseni Ndlozi called Mkunu's statement as an empty PR exercise. He says the state must start getting rid of tenders, build state capacity, and also beef up its counterintelligence.
This government of National Ndondoni is not going to succeed if it is obsessed with media. You've got to have a comprehensive, concrete strategy that is based on the lived experience of our people to combat crime. You don't have a strategy yet, and it's Katsakosiape. What must be done? Go and implant counterintelligence capabilities. We know these gangs, our people will tell you. 2, build internal state capacity. Let us do away with tenders. Tenders have crippled the local state. Many of those workers, let's insource them. Let the government build schools directly, build clinics directly. It will halve the crime of extortion in our country. The HODs in Ekurhuleni, in Tshwane, in Johannesburg, withhold payments of contractors. Some of them are crippling black businesses. They must get bribed or they don't get paid. Arrest these administrators. Let us see you raid the administration.
And that was the EFF's Mbuyiseni Ndlozi ending that report by Mercedes%. And that brings us up to time for news headlines. Yes, Modupi Mohlahlana.
Thank you very much, SK, and a very good afternoon. The Midvaal municipality in Gauteng says it has written to Eskom and the energy regulator NERSA to object to the power utilities' proposed 40% plus electricity tariff hike. Parliament's Police Portfolio Committee says it's clear that Police Minister Senzo Mchunu is determined to tackle extortion in the country, and the Ford case against IEC Commissioner Dr. Nomsama Suku has been postponed to the 7th of November for further investigations. And those are your headlines. A full news update coming up 1 o'clock.
Economic news on SAFM. Facts and figures you can count on.
Well, it's a Wednesday. Our analyst is from ABSA, and today it's Ricardo Smith, Chief Investment Officer at ABSA Global Investment Solutions, Stockbrokers and Portfolio Management. Good afternoon, Ricardo.
Afternoon, Sakina. Unfortunately, just seeing a bit of profit taking from the market, and so we are in the red for today, down around 0.6% is the all share. For the week, we are down about 2.4%, still above the 80,000 point neutral mark, so trading around 81,600 points, but much lower than the all-time high that we reached in excess of 84,000 points. And the sectors seeing a pullback across resources, financials, and industrials, and really just a general a negative sentiment across global markets as well. So seeing that trend pulling through from the US, Asian markets, and European markets. The rand did weaken slightly, but still trading below the 18 rand mark against the dollar, currently around 17 rand 90. From an economic perspective, we did see the release of a second quarter GDP coming in better than anticipated at 0.4%. Just slightly weaker, but still positive from the prior print, which was minus 0.1% in Q1. Seeing growth in electricity, in finance, in trade, and the likes, but some pullbacks and contractions in transport, agriculture, and mining, just weighing that number slightly lower. We did see last week US GDP coming in at 3%, slightly higher than what markets had penciled in. And in Europe, we saw inflation coming in at 2.2%. Which was quite a positive. And then just from a markets and company news perspective, we did see ShopRite releasing their earnings yesterday, recording growth in revenue of 12% but a bit of margin pressure there with earnings per share only growing by 4%. Seeing the supermarket segment, which is ShopRite, Usave, Checkers Hyper, and the likes, in SA, and this contributes around 80% of revenue, growing by a strong 12%. Outside of SA, growing by a slightly lower figure of 6.1%. They are in the process of offloading some of their furniture segments. Markets, not responding too positively to the news, and in light of the negative sentiment across board, and seeing that share price declining slightly yesterday despite the revenue growth, and reacting a bit more to the margin pressure and some capital expenditure being laid out in the future. We did see this morning Woolworths as well releasing, just sticking to the retail segment, releasing their results. Revenue increasing by 4.3%, however, seeing a decline in earnings per share and headline earnings per share. Strong results from the food business, but the fashion, beauty, and home segment struggling and actually declining moderately by 0.4%, and seeing some a weaker consumer environment and stiff competition, in particular in the Australian and New Zealand business. We are still digesting those results, and we'll keep updating as we see it. Thanks, Sakina.
Thank you, Ricardo Smith. Ricardo is Chief Investment Officer at ABSA Global Investment Solutions, stockbrokers and portfolio management.
SAFM Sport with John Gericka.
Hello, hello.
We have another medal.
Aha, let's talk.
When I say we, I mean Team South Africa.
Of course it's us.
It's us, all of us together. South Africa bagged a medal at the Paralympic Games this morning. Nicholas Peter de Preer won bronze in the men's H1 individual time trial. That's hand cycling. Cyclists lies on their back and they use their hands to cycle. It was 14.2 kilometer individual time trial. He did it in a time of 36 minutes, 7.05 seconds. South Africa now 46th on the medals table. They have 3 medals altogether, 1 gold and 2 bronze. Earlier this morning, women's 100-meter freestyle S12 heats. Alani Ferreira finished 6th in a heat, missed out on a place in the final. The men's 50-meter freestyle S7 heats, Christian Sadie set a time of 29.27 seconds, booked a place in the final as the 7th fastest qualifier. That final is at 6 minutes past 7 tonight. Good luck to her. In equestrian, it was the individual event grade 4. It's really dressage. Philippa Johnson-Dwyer in her 6th Paralympic Games. Work that out. She placed 14th with the top 8 advancing to the next round. Ask me how many competitors there were?
How many?
50. So she wasn't lost, Sakina.
Okay.
In athletics, the men's shot put today was the final for the F46 category. Cohen Noemdo set a distance of 15.63, finishing in 5th place. The winner with a distance of 16.38 meters, Canada's Greg Stewart winning there. Tennis on the go, Donald Rampadi and Lucas Atole up against Leandro Pena and Yamaniti Silva of Brazil for the bronze medal in the quads. That's on the go, early days there. Later on today, it's the men's long jump T64 final. Pomlelo Mhlongo jumping there, and in the women's 100 meter T37, it's the first round at 9:45. Cheryl James will be in action.
Wasn't she in action yesterday?
Yeah, so busy.
Oh.
In football news, Bafana coach Hugo Broos has named Themba Zwane as captain ahead of Friday's AFCON qualifier in Orlando. Zwane takes over the armband from Ronman Williams, who's recovering from an injury. He underwent successful shoulder surgery. He addressed an issue that's been troubling him since last season. He has resumed training with Mamelodi Sundowns. Meanwhile, Stellenbosch FC defender Fawaz Bazadin has committed to his Cape club. Some attention coming from Kaizer Chiefs. He has earned a call-up to the national side.
Obviously, it's an honor and a privilege to represent your country. I mean, growing up as a footballer, you always want to represent your country, and fortunately for me, I put in some good, consistent performances, and the coach selected me, and all I got to do is now take my chance and make the most of it.
Well, qualifying for AFCON kicks off tonight. Teams divided into 12 groups of 4. The top 2 teams advance to the finals. They'll be held. Ask me when, Sakina. The finals, the qualifying starts now. Will finish at the end of November, right? So ask me when the finals happen.
When are the finals happening, John?
The finals. Thanks for asking, Sakina.
Isn't it usually around January, February?
January, February, right? Yeah. No. So the finals will be held in December next year in Morocco. So qualifying will finish in November this year.
And then a year later?
A year later, they will have the finals.
Why?
This is what's happening.
It makes no sense.
Yeah. South Africa drawn with Uganda, Congo, and South Sudan. So the team playing this year and qualifying could be a completely different team by the end of next year. There's a whole season and a half to happen.
Totally. Sudan
take on Niger today from 3. Comores against Gambia from 5. Libya host Rwanda at 6. Also Tanzania against Ethiopia at 6 o'clock. Now the All Blacks preparing to name their side for the return rugby championship test against the Boks. There's been much talk about the bench and the powerful pack, but South African wingers also something to behold. All Black Will Jordan was full of praise for the men in the tramlines.
Yeah, Chisholm's obviously been doing it for a number of years, and over the last couple of years Kurt Lee's really come into his own, and 2 guys are in particular very hard to mark one-on-one, great footwork and powerful as well, like probably I guess short in stature but certainly not